Today is January 14, 2024. We're here to interview Harry Langbert, who is a survivor of the Holocaust. The interviewer is Esther Andor, and the videographer is Robert Wilson. We're doing this interview under the auspices of the USC Shoah Foundation. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for agreeing to doing this interview. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So I will start with asking your first name and last name, and also to spell them.
In English or
English.
Jewish?
In English.
Okay. My first name is Harry. My last name is Langbert. And Harry is Harry. Langbert is Langburt.
And what's your Jewish name, since you mentioned it?
Hersh Langbert.
Hersh.
Yeah.
When we talked the last time, you told me the story of your last name. I would really like to hear that again.
Well, I have a nickname. They used to call me the Polish way because I lived in Poland. So Hersh is Heniek, and the nickname was Heniu. As a young child, I was called Heniu, and I thought that was my name. But when I grew up, I knew how to start knowing that names change. And as a matter of fact, the same name, Langbert, had been made by my boss, the first boss I had in Canada. He told me, don't call yourself Langbert, because the French people that come to see you, they don't understand. They call you Langibert, Langlois, and things like that. Call yourself Lang. So in some areas of Montreal, or in some business, people call me Harry Lang. But it's actually Harry Langbert.
But you had a story going back to your great-grandfather about the name Langbert, or how that, from what that was changed.
Well, Langbert is actually a nickname or something like that. My great-great-great-grandfather was a city councilor, and he had a very long beard. And he had a name, his real name was Unfrieder van Steiner. And they couldn't pronounce his name. It was too long. So they told him, we're going to call you Langbert. Instead of Unfrieder van Steiner, we're going to call you Langbert, long beard. That's a nickname. That's why. But this story I heard from my father. I didn't know that before.
Where were you born?
I was born actually in Ulanów, Poland. And
what date?
I was born on May 17th, 1935. And I remember we stayed till 1939 because the war started, and my father was actually he was in the Russian army in the First World War. So he heard that, or he was afraid, I don't know about what's happened, that anybody who has anything to do with the Russians, when the Germans come in, and the Russians are our enemy, so they're going to kill you. So he and a few other men from the city, from our little town, run away to Russia until the Germans are being chased out again. So it was actually, my father thought it was going to be temporary, that he's going to be away. He tried a couple of times to come back because my mother was alone with 4 children. I had 2 sisters and a brother, and he felt kind of that he left us alone, so he wanted to come back. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, he was caught on the border by the Russians, and they didn't let him go back. So how did we get out? My mother saw what's happening because the Germans came in. And from the bombings that we had on our town, our windows were knocked out totally. So the windows were actually put on kind of wood planks to block the wind or rain, whatever would come in. And we were all sitting at night with a little lamp, and everybody was scared. My sisters were scared, and I had beautiful sisters. They were 14, I think. I don't know exactly, 14 and 15 years old. My mother was afraid the Germans are gonna, you know, I don't want to even say the word. So she said, we have to get out of here. So we sold whatever we could. At least that's what I remember. And got some money. And lucky for us, I had a cousin who was with my father and his uncle, and his father, which was my uncle. And they stayed in Russia. Not in Russia, in Ukraine, actually. Lviv was a Ukraine town. And he decided we got to bring, if we can go back to them, we got to bring the families to us. So he was a young 17-year-old man, and he got through the border was a little creek, you know, a little river. He just jumped over it, and he came. He rented a Polish farmer with a buggy and a horse, and he came in carrying a cross in front. He was walking with the cross in front, and the horse and buggy was following him. That's what I remember. And he came in and to take his mother, which was my mother's sister, and his family out. But he told my mother, "Why don't you come with us?" My mother was waiting for this kind of invitation, and we had a few, I would call zlotys at the time, whatever the both families picked up by selling goods. And we went, I remember because I was the only one sitting on the buggy in the back, and the horses were pulling us, and my grandfather, who was walking with a cane, was behind us, and he was waving to us until it disappeared, until it was too far to see. He didn't want to go with. He had a home, he had a house, and my mother's younger sister, who was 19 or 20 years old at the time, she didn't want to leave her parents alone, so she stayed behind because we wanted to take them all, and they didn't want to go. So I remember that, and I remember we were staying overnight in this farmer's barn, and there was nothing to eat but except red beets, which he had harvested maybe. And my mother said, he's going to kill us. They're going to kill. We were petrified. We were afraid. So everybody was up. I must have fallen asleep. I was a child. The next morning, in dawn, when just the sun came out, he took us across the border. We were arrested by the Russians. So the Russians picked us up and put us in jail. Not me, but the rest of the family was in jail. Me, they let me play around.
Where did you go? You were 4 years old.
Where did I go?
Yeah, you were 4 years old.
I was not playing with the soldiers, I guess, or something. The Russians, they gave me pieces of chocolate, and so I remember that, and that was it.
How long were your family in jail?
About 2 days, till they sorted out, till they registered us, and then they let us go, and they put us wherever you have to go. So my father came. He took us to a little town where he found a room and board where we had to stay, and we settled for a little while.
Before we go there, do you remember your 2 days with the Russian soldiers where your mother and your siblings were in jail?
I don't really remember. I recall that I was treated very well. I was allowed to play outside and so on, and the others were all in the jail. I don't even remember the jail.
Where did you sleep? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
Now, it's a really nice story, but we're going to go all the way back. Or before we do that, actually, just to have some names. So the cousin and the uncle who were in Russia, what's their names?
Their name was Rosenberg. My cousin was Leon Rosenberg. He was here in Canada. He passed away. he had two children and two daughters and a son, three children.
And his father, your uncle?
Was Moshe Rosenberg.
And then the sister, your mother's sister who went with you?
Her name was Kreindl Rosenberg.
Okay. Now, so as I mentioned...
They were a family of six. They were 3 girls and 3 boys. There was most of the time, they was right through Russia. They were with us in Siberia and the rest of we came back to Poland together.
We'll talk about that later, but I just want to go back a little bit to before your time, to your grandparents.
Yes.
If you could tell me what you remember of your paternal, your father's parents. Did you know them?
My father's parents, I didn't know. They were living in Bilgorai. And my father lost his father when he was 8 years old. He passed away because in Jewish religion there's a mitzvah that if you bury the dead, there was like here epidemic of cholera. There was a lot of Jewish people, dead people, and he was a young man, and he went to bury them. He was helping the whole town, was helping bury the passed away people. So he got it on himself, and he died from it. So my father was a yusim, they say in Yiddish, at the age of 8, and I don't remember my grandmother. His mother was alive, and she lived till the war started, I guess. And he had a sister, and he had 3 brothers.
Do you know anything about his brothers?
Yes, I know. One of them had a partisan group, and he was a very strong man, so he lived till the war ended, but the partisan Polish people, the Polacks, killed him after the war. And I know it because I had a cousin, he passed away here in Canada. His name was Mike Dim, and he was not really a cousin. His auntie married my uncle. So I had an uncle, and the auntie was his auntie, and he had an uncle who was my uncle. So we were kind of related, and we called ourselves cousins. So he was in the same partisan group. He was 17 when the war ended. So he heard that they killed my uncle, and he found out who the Polacks were. He went back with another man or 2 men. There were 3 of them, went back to Poland, and they got rid of they killed those. They were in the same partisan group. There was Polish people and Jewish people, and he took care of, I guess he had the English word, I don't know, but in Hebrew it's called nekamah, you know. He took care of them.
What was your uncle's name, the one who got killed?
His name was, I don't know, we called him Urish. But could be Asher or it could be Aaron, I don't know.
And what did he do before the war? You told me something about that, what he did.
He was actually a wholesaler. He did very well for himself. He was bringing wheat to the big cities, and trains of wheat. He used to buy it from the farmers and bringing it there. So he was a very well-to-do man.
And you told me an interesting story about his strength and his body.
He was very strong.
Do you remember the story you told me?
I have other stories that I could tell you, but
tell me a couple.
The other story was there came a circus to the town. My father told me that story, and they had a strong man with big muscles like now, and they were giving 500 zlotys, which was an awful lot of money, for anybody who would fight them. And if they win, they get 500 zlotys. Guess what? My uncle went and he won. He put him down. There was a wrestling match. He put him down and he won. He wasn't afraid of the devil. My father said he wasn't afraid of anybody. And he was a very bright man and knew how to behave himself too, because, you know, when you're strong, he'd never touched a fly even, you know.
Tell me the other story with the buggy and the wheel. I really like that one.
Well, he had his own horse, which was a beautiful horse, my father told me, and he had a little buggy, and a wheel fell off. And he needed a big hammer. He didn't have a hammer, so there was how do you call it in English? That's the words I'm missing.
Cross?
Pardon me?
A cross?
Not a cross. There was
like a little chapel kind of thing?
No, there was a crucifix hanging. I don't know if you call it crucifix. So he needed that, and he had this leg like this, so it looked like a hammer. So I took off that thing, used it as a hammer, and then put it back, and that was it. Which, if Polish people would see it, they would kill him. But he wasn't afraid. My father said, "You took a chance like this. How can you do that?" He says, "Well, I'm not afraid." He was really. I never met him, but I have pictures someplace of him, and I just don't know where they are right now because we moved twice from this apartment.
Well, you let me know when you find them.
Yeah. Okay.
How about your maternal grandparents? What can you tell me about them?
My Zeta was I don't know. I used to come to his house. He was very quiet. He must have been a joker because he had here on his head, he had like I would call it a half a golf ball. And it used to go back and forth under his skin. And I used to be scared. I was afraid, and he made me touch it. And it was funny. And it was very good. I remember him sitting in shul in the circle where all the older people used to hang out with his friends. And it was very religious and very, very caring for his family. And his wife was her I was afraid of, because if she babysat me and I was 2 or 3 years old, she was very skinny, a very small person. She used to put me between her knees, wash my head, you know, to clean me up, and I used to play outside and so on. But she was nice to me too. So I loved my grandparents. We were really a family that we loved one another. There was one caring for others. And the rest I don't remember.
How close did they live to you, to your house?
Well, in the little town, they lived not far from I don't remember exactly if it was close to a synagogue, but it was past a school that I remember. There was a school, not a cheder, but a school, and I was afraid of that school because there was kids going around and they could just push you down or things like that.
How often did you see them, your grandparents?
I don't know. We almost lived together, you know. We're not very far, but I saw them very often.
Do you remember how they dressed?
Like just anybody else. I did not pay attention to it. Now I would pay attention, but those days I remember my grandfather had walked with a cane. He didn't have he just walked with a cane. A lot of people walk with a cane in Poland.
And did he, because you said he was very religious, did he have a beard?
Yes.
Pious?
A beard and pious, yes.
Would he dress like the Hasidim dress now, in a kaftan, or he?
For Shabbos, he was wearing a kittel.
Mm-hmm.
you know, but I don't remember.
Do you know if your grandmother had a sheitel?
That's for sure.
Okay.
There's a story about my grandfather had a brother who moved to the United States, two brothers in those days. They came from a town called, this I learned here, called Hollischitz. Hollischitz was a little town. My brother, I don't know if he told you that, he interviewed him. There's a man that was looking for his family tree. And that man is one of the partners of Home Depot. His name is Arthur Blank. Somewhere in his family, there's a Graff name. Either it's his mother or it's his father. No, if it was his father, it would be Arthur Graff. So he sent out a whole book of where he comes from and so on. And he found us, as we are relatives of his. And my brother has the book. So here is Graffs that moved to the United States. I remember my mother used to talk of them because they used to send the nicest gifts. The uncles used to say in those days to everybody for Passover, for Rosh Hashanah, you know, like. So she remembers them. She told me about the two uncles. This is my great uncles, you know, my grandfather's brothers.
What happened to your grandparents when the war broke out?
Well, they didn't come with us. They didn't want to stay because he owned a home and didn't want to. Should be, repossessed from somebody or somebody moved in, so he stayed behind. And my brother went back. I didn't. I would not go back to Poland because I'm still angry till now. And my brother went back and he heard that my grandfather was killed by the Germans in the middle of the market, middle of the little town. And my grandmother, I don't know, but my auntie was 19. His name was Rachel Graff. She was killed also. But I have a granddaughter from here that went on the
March of the Living?
March of the Living, and she found the names of my grandfather, how he was killed, and my auntie, how she was killed, but nothing about my grandmother.
By the way, what did your grandfather do for a living? Do you know?
I don't remember. He was 70 years old, so I don't remember.
Did you know, so you talked about Rachel, did you know other siblings of your mother, or did you hear anything about them?
I did not know, but there was a brother that lived not far from our town, Rzeszów, not Rzeszów, another little town, who was named Wolf Graff. And another brother my mother had moved from Germany to the United States in 1938. He had 5 stores, and when the Kristallnacht came, he was they broke the windows of his stores, and he was so afraid. He says, I peed in my pants. And he says, I took my family the next day, and I got out of there, left everything, and he ran away with his family. I have 2 cousins. I don't know, now we were keeping in touch for a while, but now everybody got older, and you know, slowly you forget about one another.
This uncle was called Israel, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Kreindl is the family that went with you.
That's
and there
the older sister of my mother, older than my mother.
And there was another brother that you told me about.
Yes, Hirsch.
And what do you know about him?
he married a woman in Hungary, and he lived in a town, Újhely. And when we came to Canada, my mother went to a bakery for buy challah for Shabbos, and my mother was a woman that wanted to know what everybody has, where they live, what they did in their life. She asked, "From where are you from?" And she says, "I am from Hungary." So my mother asked, and she asked him, where are you from? She says, "I'm from Poland." Anyway, so my mother, when she said, "I'm from Hungary," my mother says, "I had a brother who had married a woman in Hungary, and he lived in a town by the name of Újhely." I don't know if I'm saying it right, Újhely. And she says, "Well, I come from Újhely." So my brother says, "I had a brother, my brother lived there, he married there." She says, "What was his name?" My mother answered, "His name was Hersch Graf." So the woman answered, "He was my father." So that's the way it happened here. You see, I'm getting goosebumps.
Did you keep in touch with this woman afterwards?
No, because my mother was religious, but she didn't wear a sheitel. So the woman came to visit us. I never met her because I was working, and she came to visit us on a working day, like on a Monday or Tuesday, I don't know, to my mother, and she did not come back because my mother wasn't religious enough for her. Because my mother's brother was so religious that I never saw that, but my mother used to tell me, there were three sisters, so if two sisters stood and he had to pass between them, he wouldn't pass. He had to make them move so they could pass.
Do you know what he did in Hungary?
He was a rabbi.
Okay.
In that little town. I don't know what kind of rabbi, but a rabbi.
Wow. From the sound of it, an Orthodox rabbi, if not Hasidic. Yeah.
He was very Hasidic. He was even more than my grandfather. That's what I heard. I was too young to know him, you know.
Let's move on to your parents. Let's start with your mother. What was her name?
Golda Graf.
And do you know when she was born and where?
She was born in Ulanov in 1895. And that's all.
Can you describe her from the outside?
You have a picture of her right
You still
there.
have to describe her. We'll look at the picture afterwards.
She was a very, well, the first thing is, of my mother, she was very, very clean. She was, maybe today they would call it, that's some kind of, I don't even know how to say it. She never let me go out if my shoes weren't shined, if my suit was not inspected, if I did something that I left a glass or something, she used to run away and pick it up. So I remember here, I had already nieces, and we came to Canada. Everybody got furniture, and then you put a plastic on the furniture. And even with the plastic, you don't mess up your couch, you don't mess up your bed, or you don't mess up anything. She was unbelievable. But her answer was, a balabusta has to be a balabusta. She never let my father do anything in the kitchen, get out of the kitchen. This is my territory. That's the way she was.
How did she dress?
How did she dress?
If you think
Very modern. Very modern. She was a woman who wanted to be, I don't know. She was very religious. She wouldn't pick up the phone on Saturday. And I don't understand how you can be so religious. I mean, I understand how you could be so religious and yet have a modern outlook, because the religious people today, you go in. I was in Florida when my father, after my mother passed away, And he stood in a religious hotel, and I came to visit him, and the women walk around with this things, not a shadel, with everything, but they never dressed like my mother. My mother was up to date.
Did she make her own clothes, or did she buy them?
She bought them. She wasn't a seamstress. She knew how to sew, but she wasn't a seam. My mother had the most beautiful handwriting you could have. I mean, she had what do you call German?
Gothic letters?
Yes. When we got married, she wanted to write the invitations, but we went to somebody else. She is the only person that I know from a little town that had school to grade 8. She finished grade 8. Kaiser Franz Josef, she told me, made them go to school.
Did she do anything outside of the home, any kind of work?
No. She did. Forced labor, yes.
That's not what I meant, like normal labor.
Yeah. She wanted to be a balbusta. The children should be dressed nice, clean, and everything else. If I would go out with dirty shoes, she says, they're not going to say that you're a shloch. They're going to say your mother is a shloch. I don't know if you understand what shloch means.
Yeah. Do you know how they met, your mother and your father?
It was a shidduch. And she said, he came, I don't know, there was the shadchan, I guess, brought them together. And my father was a person who read a lot of, he was, if you would see him, he never was without a book or without a newspaper, without constantly seeing and his glasses up and constantly reading. And he knew an awful lot of what's going on in the world. And he was a type of a man that had a lot of ambition, but he didn't show it. He was quiet, but he had ambition in his life, and that's what kept him going.
You mentioned that he read a lot. Do you remember books in your home before the war?
Tolstoy. He read that. He told me that when I learn how to read, I should read that. His friend was what was his name? Isaac Bashevis Singer was his best buddy. As a matter of fact, Isaac Bashevis Singer was, and he had a street named after him in Florida, but he was still alive, and my father met him, he came to visit him. So they got together,
Did you have a lot of books at home in Poland?
I don't remember.
You don't remember. And do you know in what languages he read?
Every language you could possibly get.
So he could read in Russian?
Yes. But he never went to school. He went to Cheder. But it's all self-taught. He spoke a beautiful Russian. He spoke Polish. He spoke Hebrew. Going to synagogue, he never needed a book. He knew it all by heart. He could read the Torah. I can't. He could read the Torah. He knew everything, every holiday, everything. But he was a very modern person, a person that was not, it was not really, like old-fashioned. It was modern. If I did something, let him go, he'll find out himself. Let them learn by themselves. We don't need to keep them, And he was a family man. I remember certain things that he did when we were in Siberia. I told you that before. This stayed in my mind forever. We used to get this piece of bread for the family, ration bread, not Russians, rations. So they gave us 30 grams per person, this I remember. And the bread was so moist that the water was coming out of it. So that was heavy. 30 grams was a lot of water in it. And he used to cut it for 6 people. And he gave himself just a bite, me the biggest piece, my brother next biggest, and my sisters. And then him and my mother used to cut little pieces just to survive, to make the family survive. That was a lot of people died from hunger in Siberia too, but a lot of.
You mentioned that he read the Torah and everything. Did he? Do you know if he went to yeshiva, not just Heder? No.
No. It's all self. He was, even in mathematics, which when I started learning algebra and things like that, I came home and I making my homework, and you could ask sometimes for help. And he said, I could only show you one little trick. If you do additions and subtractions and things like that, and used to make like 2 things and put them all together. I don't remember how he did it. I wish I could remember it. And if these things in each side come out, what's supposed to be, and I'm telling this story, but I really don't remember it. And it was always right. He says, you want to know if your answers are right, you take that. This and that, add together, put in the number. It's like a trick, but I don't remember that.
You mentioned that your mother was pretty religious. How about your father?
Modern religious. Davening every day. Used to take his talis out, daven, but modern religious.
How often did he go to synagogue?
Pardon me?
How often did he go to synagogue?
When he had here we didn't give him a chance because he was helping us and he wanted to earn some money. But when he had a chance, sure. Shabbos, yes, he used to go to synagogue. But the middle of the week, I don't think he was. Sometimes, when he had a chance to go.
I still didn't ask you his name and where and when he was born, before we forget.
Okay, his name was Leib Langbert. His date of birth was August the 20th in 1895.
And where?
In Bilgorai.
What did he do for a living before the war?
What did he do for a living?
I mean, if you know.
He was actually I would call today you buy futures. He used to, I don't know what you call a person who buys futures. He used to go to a farmer, and the farmer had land, and he just sowed the field full of grain or whatever else, but mainly grain. And he used to tell him, well, we don't know how big your crop is going to be. Whatever it's going to be, let's make a price and I'll pay you right in advance. So he would have the money to pay him. He bought a few fields, and if we had a bad season, he was losing his shirt. But when he had a good season, he was doing well, very well.
So it was like wholesale?
He used to sell it to wholesalers. He didn't sell it to private people, to his brother. And maybe he learned it from his brother. So that was his kind of business. But he was he was teaching us, you don't have guts, you have to have guts. And he told me like this, there's no businessman, he can't be a good businessman if he didn't have any losses. You got to have losses, and you got to correct your mistakes. And you got to have income, make profits, and know how to preserve them. And that was his. Every time he came, if I had a bad day in business or so on, he says, you can't go to bed with things. You had a bad day, forget about it. Tomorrow you're going to have a good day. Be a very, very ambitious person. And ambition is a good manner a person should have. I don't know if it's the right word to say manner. Ambition brings you in life, you live your life better. People who don't have ambition,
before we move on, just if you could mention your siblings' names.
okay. My oldest sister was named Manya, Miriam, I guess. We used to call her Manya. My second sister was Rivka. My brother's name is Nathan, and I was Hirsch.
I know that you were very young when you left Ulanov, but what memories do you have of that town?
What memories? I didn't like my rabbi that took me to Cheder.
Why?
I just didn't like him. I didn't want to be in school. I wanted to play. And he was dragging me. He had about 8 or 10 students, and he used to come to collect them. So I told you I had cousins. This cousin Leon that came here, he used to hide me. I used to pass his houses. He used to hide me. And I always had an excuse, like I have a bad stomach, I don't want to go, I'm sick, and so on. My mother used to tell me, you better go. And when I would go, I used to hide in my... They helped me, you know. They thought it was funny, my cousins. So.
Where was the Cheder? In his house?
Yes. He used to bring to the house all the kids, and it was half asleep most of the time. You know.
Do you remember what you learned? What kind of subjects?
Aleph Beis, and you learned Modiani, and you learned Kumetz Aleph U, Kumetz Beis Bu, you know, so I remember those things.
Do you remember, did you learn the Torah, or you didn't get that far?
No, I was 3 years old.
You were just learning the alphabet?
Yeah.
Do you remember what time Cheder started, when it finished?
Every morning. Every morning. I don't remember when it was finished, but every morning. He used to come, and my mother used to dress me up and go with the Rebbe.
Who were the other children that were in your Cheder class?
I don't remember. Yeah. I'll tell you a story. After the war, I had friends. I went already to school in Pocking, Bavaria. And I was very disappointed because I made a lot of friends there. And one of them was Philip Golding. And we were going to school together. But I had a group that I was together, and they gave us uniforms, dressed us up because we were very good students. And one of them lived in Toronto. My brother found out that he lives in Toronto and is coming to Florida. So I was waiting. I'm going to have a friend when I was 14, not when I was 12 years old, 11 years old. And I come and I meet him. He says, I don't remember. He didn't remember anything of his life. Yeah.
Do you remember the neighborhood you lived in Ulanov?
Ulanov had and we lived on the main street because I remember when the Germans come in and they were walking with their boots, and you could hear boom, boom, boom. You know, the troops were coming in, but they were in a formation type of thing. And so I remember that because we had, you know, cobblestone roads. So the cobblestone was making a lot of noise. And we had a river called San, the San River. So it was Ulanov, not Sanem. And they went over the bridge and it came. So I don't know how far we were from the bridge. I remember that. And I remember at the day of bombardment, the Germans, the 2 planes or 3 planes flew by, and we were looking. I went with my brother to the barber. And he was holding my hands, and when the bombs fell, I kind of became by myself, and he became by himself, and we couldn't find one another for a while. And somebody picked me up, and knew where I live, and they brought me back. I came home, and my sister was wounded. So it was a big, a very tough day, because everybody was running around where we're going to get a doctor. We couldn't get a doctor. So my father was still there. When they bombarded, they didn't come in. The Germans came in after the bombardment, so my father ran away after. But the Polish army was there. They confiscated our house because we ran away from the bombardment. So he took us, my father had friends in a farmer or something, he took us there. My sister was wounded, he took her there, and there he had I guess he knew of a veterinarian that fixed up my sister's wound. She had one under her leg and one here, one shrapnel. So this, I remember more or less where I lived, but if you bring me there today, I wouldn't know. My brother went back, he knows.
Do you remember any of the neighbors?
No.
The neighbors? No.
No. I don't even remember if I had any friends as a young child. I don't remember that.
And just going back to this day of the bombardment and you losing your brother, what were your feelings?
Scared, very scared. I guess I was crying, and somebody picked me up and brought me back to my house.
If you have any memories of your house inside, please share that with me.
Well, when the bombs blew out the windows, so they came and they boarded up our windows with boards, and somebody, it's either my sister or my brother, hung a beret on the boards at night, and the light was very small and dim. And one of my sisters says, somebody put the head through the boards, it's coming in. She thought it was, the beret made it look like a head is coming in. This I remember because I was scared. Somebody's coming in, and she thought somebody's coming in. Nobody remembered putting a beret on the thing, So this I remember. I remember the kitchen a little bit, and I remember the backyard, the door to the backyard.
What do you remember of the kitchen?
It was not a fancy kitchen. It was a stove with where to put in wood, and there was a fire where you put your dishes on top to cook. That's what I remember. It was mainly wood burning stoves.
Did you have running water in the house?
I don't know. I can't remember.
And do you remember how many rooms you had?
I don't know. I know we had a basement, and my father used to make cherries in a big jar, and it was delicious.
Where did you sleep? Did you sleep in one room with your brother, or all the children slept?
With my brother. I think we slept in the same bed. I think so. He would remember more.
Do you have any memories of Friday night dinners before the war, or Shabbat?
I remember my father making, before he started, he used to come home from shul, and he would come in with a song, and he was singing, and we started dinner, and making the kiddush and so on. This I remember.
Were your grandparents there with you?
No. Sometimes we went to them for Shabbos. Sometimes, if they made a bigger family dinner. I remember my grandfather had in the house, I don't know what you call it today, but there was a place where you sat, and I guess the hot air from the stove went inside that thing, and you sat down. It was very warm. This I remember, but I don't remember how you call it.
And was your family Shomer Shabbat?
Sure.
So what did you do on Shabbat as a family?
I'll tell you what I did.
What did you do?
My grandmother had a candy store, and she made her own ice cream, and it was the best ice cream I still remember and I remember what she did. She had that can, metal can, and she used to turn it like this, like this, like this, with green salt or something like that, and ice. And then the ice cream was finished. So my parents gave me money to go buy myself ice cream. But Shabbat, you can't use money. So I used to go to, I guess I remember when I stayed with her, she used to give me, she would leave inside that can, leave enough ice cream so for me to clean it up. This, I remember, she used to enjoy watching me looking like that if I'm still eating it. And then on Shabbat, summertime, I guess, I couldn't go to her competition because when I had money, I went to her competition because she gave me for free. So I went to one day, Shabbos, I come and I say, I want some ice cream. So she says, well, you didn't bring in money. So I said, it's Shabbos. So she says, well, where do you get your ice cream in the middle of the week? She knew. So I said, I go to, and a fellow by the name of Pshibish. I go to Pshibish. So she says, why didn't you go now to Pshibish? Because he doesn't give me any. So you come, well, this I remember about my grandmother. She was enjoying that. Why do I remember this? Because my mother used to tell me what I did. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a very good boy.
Okay, I think we kind of arrived to the war now. You told me about the day of the bombing, and you told me about your father leaving. So I think we can go to when you got out of prison, or your family, and your father came to get you. Where did you settle?
I think that town, I'm almost sure, but she said something?
No, she just coughed.
There was, I remembered the name. I told you last time, but now I don't remember. A little town.
Sheretz?
Sheretz.
Sheretz.
We went to Sheretz. We lived in that town. And my parents were, I don't know, my sisters, what they were doing. I guess nobody was working, but my parents were doing some kind of things to buy whatever money they had, to buy vodka they were selling in Lemberg, which is the town is now not Lvov, but
yes,
Lviv. And they used to go there, stay in line, and buy the vodka, and then sell it on the black market for more than what they paid. So they have money to buy food. And this was about 25 to 30 kilometers from Sheretz. So they were going like almost twice, 3 times a week to get that and to sell it, and that was it. So that's the way they made a living.
How did they get from?
Train. As a matter of fact, I went by myself from there. They left me, they left me with my brother and sisters, but they went out someplace and I was at home. I picked myself up and I went there and I got off the train and I walked and I found them in line, standing in line. My father was flabbergasted. He wanted to kill me.
You were 4.
I was 4 years old, yeah. So you become like a real adult when you're in these kinds of situations. You start thinking like an adult. You're not a child anymore. You know, it's. I don't know how other people feel about it, but I knew where to be quiet, when to talk, or I knew all that without my parents telling me that. And I guess I wasn't the only one. Everybody, all the children, fear and circumstances make you think like that. You become an adult before you are an adult, age-wise.
And when you say I knew when to speak, when to keep quiet, can you give me examples of that? Do you remember?
Well, I'll tell you what I told you when we were in that barn when we left. And we were in a farmer's barn, and everybody was afraid, be quiet, don't talk, and everybody wasn't asleep. I thought I fell asleep, but till I fell asleep, I was thinking about the same thing. I have to be quiet. I have to behave. I can't cry. I can't do things like that. My mother didn't tell me that. When my cousin came with a cross. I know we don't believe in crosses. But came with a cross. Why? I started thinking as a child, why did he come with a cross? And you know why. You know the answer why by yourself. So children, at least I, as a child, I was grown up. I protected my parents, even in Russia, protected. Well, I'll give you a little story. I don't know if my brother told you. When we were in Siberia, my parents were away. My brother and I took a saw. We needed wood to heat, and we cut down a big tree. I was pulling one end, and I wasn't strong enough, so he was just, wait, I'll come to your side, and he helped me pull it, and then he pulled it, and we cut down a tree. So, and then we chopped it up. Not me, my brother more than me, but I helped him.
He didn't tell me that story.
No.
How long did you stay in Szczeresz?
In Szczeresz, it's not very long, maybe a couple of months, 3 months, because I remember that thing that came. Russian soldiers came, 3 of them, and it says, put your belongings together, and you're going maybe home or something like that. But they didn't say the truth. They put us on cattle cars, on a train, and we didn't know where we're going. Why was that? Because my parents told me after, when the Russians came to ask my parents what do we want to do, stay in Russia or go back home? My mother said we want to go back home. So that's what the Russians thought, that we're spies. We believe in the Germans more than them. So they put us on those trains, and it took us, we didn't know where we're going. We ended up in Siberia.
Before we leave with the train, you said your parents bought vodka to sell it on the black market. What were your days like? What did you do?
I didn't do anything. I was just playing in that little town. I don't remember if I had any children friends. I don't remember that.
Do you remember your apartment there?
No.
No.
I remember that we didn't have any money. That's all I remember, because and you could hear your parents talking what we're going to do tomorrow for food and things like that. So.
What kind of food did you have?
Don't remember.
And Kreindl and her family, they were with you?
They were with us in the same cities, the same towns. I don't know where they lived. I remember in Siberia, I remember where they lived, and in Tajikistan, I remember where they lived.
Did you, when you ran away from Poland, did you, a little boy, take anything with you that was yours?
I don't remember. I don't remember that. I guess my parents brought the things that belonged to me, or what, toys or things like that. I don't know.
But you didn't have anything
I used to make my
special.
own toys.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
How did you make your own toys?
Well, things, if you had a spool of thread, I guess you learned that in cheder, I don't know, you cut little, there's 2 wheels on the side, in the middle there's the thread. So I used to cut the wheels, to make them like tires, you know, and then you have a little piece of rubber, and you put it through. On one side, I used to put soap, and the other side with a pencil to stick through the thing and wind up that rubber piece, wind up so it tries to unwind. Then it drives by itself. So that's the toys I used to make. As a matter of fact, I made it for my little kids, my grandchildren.
One thing I didn't ask you, and it will be interesting here to say too, is the language you spoke at home and what your first languages were.
The language I spoke at home was Yiddish, all the time Yiddish. The languages I started speaking, I was very easy to pick up languages, so I spoke Russian perfectly. I spoke Polish, I don't know how good, but Russian I remember speaking, that I forgot my Yiddish because they took me away to a kinderheim for a while and they just spoke Russian there, and I forgot my Yiddish. I came back, I had to refill my brain with Yiddish.
So now we are at the point of you being loaded onto the train.
Yeah, and just a thing that you don't know about, so I'll tell you something that I didn't tell you. When we were put up on the train in Lviv, they had, I remember almost, I don't know if it was like a 2x4 bar, it's big open doors with slide from the back. And so it's a cattle car. Like today they have, it's not a train that has cars for to having people in it. So they shoved us in. I remember my mother's sister and their family and us, and there's strangers there, and there was a girl there that had a boyfriend outside, and he was on another car across from us on another train. And I was holding on to that piece of plank, a plank of wood that was so you shouldn't fall out. And that girl ran to say goodbye to her boyfriend on the other train, and she pushed me, and I fell out from the train to the other tracks. And I hit my head, and it cut me here, and I couldn't speak anymore. My father, and it was bleeding like anything, my father grabbed me, and right away, I don't know where he found the doctor, where the doctor lives, and he was, this I remember, Henyu, redapis, talk to me, retsimi. I couldn't talk. So they took me to the doctor. The doctor found me. The doctor came with all kinds of looking in, all kinds of things that doctors use. He checked me out. And he said, in a half a more millimeter, he would have cut the brain and I wouldn't be living anymore. But I remember, this I don't remember so much. What I don't remember is my father, come on, Henyu, talk to me, and I couldn't talk.
So how did that resolve?
6 weeks later, I was okay.
And for 6 weeks you couldn't talk?
No, I talked after a couple of days. The doctor said that must have something there in the brain. But I still have the big scar.
What was the wagon, these cattle cars, like inside? What was inside?
Just plain empty, nothing in it.
So where did people sleep?
On the floor. We brought our, you know what, our most valuable thing that we had is a blanket, a puchkoldra. That's what we carried all over Siberia, anywhere. That's kept us warm. This was not only us, every Jewish person had that. If they had it. If they had it, was a savior. It saved your life.
Were there other Jews in your cattle car?
Yes.
But not everybody was Jewish?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody. That girl that pushed me was a Jewish girl. It wasn't her fault. She just pushed me without wanting to push me, but she wanted to get in front to see her boyfriend. So I was a little kid, I guess. I don't know how she pushed me, but she pushed me out without willing.
Do you have any idea how many people were put in one car?
Between 30 to 40 people.
But you had enough space to sit down and lie down?
Yes, it's a train car is pretty big. I mean, you have to load it up with a lot of things in it, but it's pretty big, I think. I mean, it was tight, but we were on the train for 6 weeks.
Who fed you?
I think the Russians gave us food, I think so, because we wouldn't have survived. So they must have given us food. We had, every train station had boiled water. It was called kipitok. Kipitok, it was boiled water. You came out with your chainik or whatever. As a matter of fact, I painted one. And you filled it up with hot water. So at least you had hot water. And then whatever you had to put in that hot water, that was food. On the way back from Russia, we brought other things. We brought you take fat from a sheep and you melt it and you then fill up jars with that. So we came back. We had a little bit to have to survive on, but because we were free already. But to go there, I think we had to be fed. We had to be given. And I remember there were other trains that were coming, and some people just jumped out of it. They were run away from it. But the Russians caught them and they put them in jail, I guess. I don't know.
Did you have soldiers guarding your train?
Yes.
Inside your wagon?
No. No. They came and they closed the doors on the outside, and I don't know what was outside, whether there was a hook or whether there was a lock. I don't know. There wasn't actually. It must have been a hook or something like that, because it wasn't. I don't really remember.
And when you said that at the stations, at every station there was water, was there any possibility to get out at the stations?
Yes. Out of the station itself,
no,
I don't know.
Out of the train.
Out of the train, yes, because everybody went down to stretch their legs and to walk a little bit, and they gave you room to walk all the way up and down. And I remember another thing: if you wanted to cook something, if you had something to cook, take that hot water. One person was put in jail because he wanted to have some oil from the wheels of the train. He put in a shmata and made it so it could burn and make his meal, you know. So he was taken and put in jail. You know, so that was really that most that I remember.
Did you yourself get out at the station?
Yes.
What did you do?
Walk.
And how did they make sure that people don't run off at stations?
I don't know. They must have had. There were soldiers with having rifles on their back, walking back and forth. Sorry that I put my hands on.
What season? Let me see. I think you left Sheresh in the summer.
Yeah.
So.
I think it was more like the fall already, because I remember wearing already heavier clothes.
Inside the wagon?
Yes.
Was there any heating?
Heating? No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, you have to heat yourself.
And you were not told, for the 6 weeks you were going, you were not told where you're going?
No.
So you arrived, yeah, go on.
Don't you have my brothers talking? He would tell you more than I do.
No, that's...
He was bigger, he knows.
Yeah.
He was running down most of the time. He was a very swift kind of kid. He was first to get out of anything. Then.
It's interesting because you have different memories. You tell me different stories from him. So that's interesting. So you arrived where? after 6 weeks?
In a town called, a town, it was I don't know, and a couple, there was maybe 10 houses, and it's called Langur.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in Siberia. And it was, I don't remember if we had snow that time, if it was snow or ice, but it was very cold. And maybe not snow so much. Snow was later on. So it must have been in the early fall. That's what I think.
Where did you settle? Where were you housed?
We had a house. We had a budka, they called it.
What's that?
That's a little like they make today to store your tools for the summer. You know, a little nothing house. And there was a stove inside, wood stove, and where to cook, I guess. And I think maybe one bedroom or something. We all slept in the. We slept 6 people in one bed. You know, this way instead of across, and make their bed the way we made it to be able to sleep. So you put some pillows here and there if you had, and that was it.
But every family, your family
to go to the bathroom, you went outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I would tell you, it's like here they call it a bush. Big trees, maybe 5 steps from your house, you were in the bush. And if you went 50 steps, you might get lost and don't know how to come back. So that's where we were. It was like maybe, I don't know, if a horse went for 5 minutes, you got lost. You didn't see him anymore. So there wasn't too many people, maybe a couple of hundred, maybe 300 people in that Langur. That's what I think.
But that was a camp. It wasn't just a town.
Yeah,
right?
It wasn't a town, no.
And your family had their own hut?
Yes.
So every family had their own hut?
Yes.
So you mentioned that you remember where Crandall and her family lived in Siberia.
Yes, they're across from us. Well, my aunt's son, who was a few years older than my brother, I don't know, he didn't go to work outside. He stayed with my brother, and he and my brother and a few people that stayed behind, we kind of tried to get food somehow. So some of them went to pick mushrooms. We went to pick, I remember him, my brother, and a woman with a baby, and maybe about 20 of us young people, but she was already married and she had a baby. And we went to pick cranberries. And the cranberries were so sour that we were eating while we were picking them, and your tongue became totally chapped. I figured that my tongue is, you eat, and we got lost. And we didn't know how to get back. We went into the bush, into the forest. My brother, I told you, he climbed on one tree, couldn't see anything. He found the tallest tree, and he went up all the way to the top. He climbed it all the way to the top, and he saw smoke coming from one area, and we went that direction, and we came home. Because we got lost. We were about, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 people going to pick food for. So cranberries were food, but it's very sour when you pick them.
What other foods did you have?
Potatoes, if we could steal some.
From whom?
Well, not steal. If somebody had the nachalniks, they had better home. A nachalnik is a supervisor or whatever. He was the head of like a mayor of the town. He had a little piece of land, maybe, I don't know, 20 feet by 50 feet, something like that. He used to plant potatoes. He lived there for a while, potatoes every year. And when you take out, some potatoes stay inside, some of them. So I used to go out and dig, and I'll find a little potato and maybe dig more. So if I found 3, 4 potatoes, it was a big day for me, for my family.
Where did you get the food from, apart from this and what you collect?
I guess I don't know from where, but the bread came from someplace, and I guess they must have had some place, a place where they distributed food.
Beside bread and sometimes potatoes and mushrooms and
Well,
what else did you eat?
bread, we used to get farina, with the bread, a little thing of farina that was cooked, but it gelled like it was like a piece. And my mother used to take that farina and put it in a big pot and cook it and make a soup out of it. So, and put in maybe if she had onion or something or a potato, and make it into a soup, edible soup. But meat or anything like that, the first time I ate it was when we came to Tajikistan.
How about dairy products or eggs?
I don't remember. I remember when I was taking into the Kinderheim, they used to give us matzah. I don't know where they got the matzah. They used to give us matzah to eat instead of bread because every child had diarrhea. And this gave me even more diarrhea.
This little town or camp of 300 people.
I don't know if 300, could have been 1,000. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Was there any kind of fence around?
No. It was all bush, like, you know. If you wanted to run away, it's for sure you're going to die because there was no way out.
How did you get there from the train?
The train came to not far from the town. The train, I know that there was a train tracks were there. But if you took the train tracks to run away, which direction are you going to run? There, unless a person that knows geography, knows how, and he goes by the... I learned that in the Israeli Gatna. I know how to get back. I know we're north, we're south, we're east and west. So...
You mentioned that there was the Nachalnik. What other kind of supervisors or like who were the other people who lived there?
I don't remember supervisors. I remember he had a daughter. She was a little bit older than me, and he used to make for her, and I was kind of friendly with her. She was a little older. He used to make her a, not on wheels, but a board and a steering wheel with the board attached with a piece of wood. It had a steering wheel, and he made it into like almost like a ski type of thing. He used to turn it upside down, pour water on it during the day, and then when it froze up, it was ice on the board. And when you turned it this way, you were going skating, like, you know. It was, you were holding on and you push with one foot, and you had fun riding it, like skiing. So I found out that she's afraid of tractors, and I wanted that board, and she was riding it. So I used to say, Nina, tractor idiot. She used to throw it away, run away. So I took it and had fun. This I remember.
What did your parents do? What kind of work did they have to do?
My father was cutting trees. My 2 sisters, my father was cutting trees and he was away from town, sometimes for days. My 2 sisters, Russian, had trucks going on wood, burning wood, I guess, gives steam, and the steam made the engines go. So my sisters were cutting wood and cutting it down and chopping it to little squares of wood. And these little squares of wood, you put it into the boiler, I guess, and they burned it. Not the boiler, but something next to the boiler of the truck. And the steam, that was the engine of the trucks. So they were working doing that. So they were going by, you know, on a train, there's a thing that you keep, I don't know how you call it, a little car on 4 wheels, and you have like two steering wheels or something like. You press it down, the next person presses the other way, and it makes the. So that's the way they were going to work every day. They used to come home every day. But my father, I don't think so. And my mother, I don't remember because I was taken away to, I guess she was at home, but also working, something to do with, you have to be productive there.
Do you know when your sisters who went to work every day and came home every day, do you know what time they had to go in the morning and what time?
Very early in the morning, and then come home when it was still light outside, or still daylight. So once they had an accident, and the same sister that got hurt, and that thing turned over, and she was cut all over the place. And that's it. You know, it's very difficult to remember really details, remember more or less. It's like a dream in my head.
But you do remember, you have details because you can see it. You were there, I think, a year.
So no, you were, almost 2 years.
So you were there during winters. How did you deal with the winter?
Yeah, how did you deal? You cover up with the blanket that saved our lives. That's the puch and the cauldron that my mother have everybody schlep on their backs, wrapped up, and that's what saved our lives.
But they had to go out to work in the winter as well, right?
Yes. And they were dressed, I guess, sweaters, things like that, whatever clothes you had to keep you warm. Yes, the Russians gave us Valenkis, this I remember. Valenkis are like boots made out of, I don't know how to call it. Today they put that into boots as a liner, but it was this thick, it was black. And what it was made of, I'm not sure, but it was made out of yarn things. And it was shaped, and you walked with that, the water did not go through. It absorbed water after a while, sure, but when they were new, they were fantastic against cold. You weren't cold, the feet were warm.
Did they give you any other piece of clothing, like gloves, hats?
I don't remember, but I remember Valenkis because I remember the name of it. It was called Valenkis. It was like boots still here.
What did you do during the winter? Did you go out of your hut?
I was going to steal that little thing from Nina.
And in the summers, do you remember like the different seasons, how life changed according to season?
Yeah, life changed because I went to dig potatoes every day. I must have been a few houses like that had potatoes. They didn't care if you dig out whatever they left, it's fine. So they were not chasing me away from the things. I went for that thing.
Do you remember any guards or soldiers?
There must have been some because I don't remember any. I remember there were a couple of horses that were pulling sleighs, that were bringing wood, transporting to one end, from one end to the other. That's it.
You mentioned a few families or individuals that you remember from Langor. If you could talk about those.
Yeah, there was I don't think he lived with us. There was a Mr. Linder that was, he was by himself. He lost his family, I guess, and he left his family, or he was the only who ran away and he couldn't get his family. I don't know his story. But my mother adopted him as a man that can't do anything for himself, so she tried to help him wash his clothes and things like that. She would, and didn't ask for anything. There was just a deed to help him out. He was with us, and he was keeping my father company. And there was a family by the name of Gisver I remember these two, a father and a son, because I remember him from later on, but he came from the same Langur, and they were really very bad off, because the son, I don't know if he was 100% mentally okay or not, or the father was a very proud man, and he didn't want anybody to give him any extra. And my father, whatever we had to share, he would share with him, with these three people. And one thing I remember is, I don't remember his name. I think his name was Fanto, a German Jew. I don't remember if it was in Langur or it was someplace else, but I remember him going around when they give you the piece of bread, and he used to take a bite and hide the rest, and he was going around like this. This I remember because I found it very funny. He used to go around, oh my God, das Brot gives me keine Ruhe. You know what that means?
The bread gives me no peace?
No peace. Das Brot gives me keine Ruhe. It does not. Ruhe means, in German, how do I translate it? Not peace.
Doesn't satisfy him? It's not
No. Because he had it there, and he knew he has it, so he has to go and eat it, but he didn't want to eat it. You understand? So it doesn't give him peace, actually. Yeah, you're right, peace.
Tell me about the Kinderheim, how you got to be taken away and when, how...
Well, they wanted everybody to become Russian. Za Stalina, za Rodinu, za Stalina vperod. This I remember. They were teaching us. They put me, it's called a gaustuk. That's a kerchief in red with a thing. That was a gaustuk. And put us together, and we were walking in like soldiers, and we were yelling, za Rodinu, za Stalina vperod. For the country and for Stalin, let's go.
But where was this Kinderheim?
I don't remember, but it was out of that little town, maybe in a close-by town or something like that. Or so.
How long were you there?
I think about a year. That's about it.
Do you remember the circumstances when they took you from your parents?
I remember the circumstances. I got diarrhea there, and every kid had diarrhea. And I remember I was, I don't know if it was a nurse or a doctor examining me, and they put me, I don't know, I don't remember taking any medications, but the food, they brought in matzah. That's all I remember. I don't remember what they fed us with, other stuff.
How many children were there with you?
I don't know. I really was like a terrier out with my roots. I didn't have anybody to... I was very upset and very sad, but I knew I have to be like that. They promised my parents that I'll be back. And a lot of kids were separated from the parents, never came back. So, I don't know. Really, I don't even know. When I tell my brother, he doesn't remember that. But I remember.
What were your living circumstances in the Kinderheim?
What's that?
What were your living circumstances in the Kinderheim?
We were sleeping in a room, quite a few children, and most of us on the floor. We had a little, I don't know if it was a mattress or it was a little blanket on the floor, and we were all sleeping on the floor. And was one bathroom, and when you have diarrhea, you run. And everybody wanted to go in, and a lot of them made in their pants. I don't know if I did or not. I don't remember that. But that was it. It wasn't a very pleasant time of my life.
Who looked after you? Who were the adults?
There was one Jewish woman who was Russian, and she spoke a couple of Jewish words. There must have been these nurses. I don't know if they were nurses or something.
And what was, if you remember, what was the daily routine in this place?
I know we were in line a lot, walking, marching. That was it. And always Stalin in the vocabulary, more than any other word. Stalin, Stalin, Stalin. Za Stalina.
Any schooling?
No.
And you were about 5 or 6 years old. Were the other kids your age, or were there older kids, like your, say, your brother's age?
No, this I don't remember, but mostly a little bit the same size or smaller than me or bigger than me, but not much. So I can't tell their age or so.
How about making any friends there? Anybody you became close to?
I don't remember.
Oh. And in this 1 year, were you able to go and see your parents, or could they come and see you?
I think once I saw them. Once I saw them, and then I remember being freed and put back, and that's when I started learning Yiddish again, because I didn't remember any Jewish words. But it came very fast, because you start hearing parents talking.
Would you remember that day when you could finally go back home to your parents? How that happened?
No, I don't remember that. I remember when my father was very happy that we were freed. That was after I came home. We were freed. We could go anywhere in Russia we wanted. And we chose to go to Uzbekistan because it was a warm country. And we came to Uzbekistan, and on the way, my brother got lost. My two sisters went to stay behind to pick him up. Then my father stayed behind to pick him, all of them, because everybody got lost. But I had a very smart father. I'm very, and my parents were very smart. He made everybody mark it down in their heads. If you get lost, you come to Tashkent, and that's where everybody's going to meet. Don't leave the station of Tashkent. Stay there forever if you have to. And when he left the train to look for my brother, because my brother was, 10, 11, 12, I don't know. I don't remember the years, maybe 12. And my brother was, I told you, very fast. There were German Jews traveling on luxury trains. They had a lot of food. So when you run off your train, you went to say, can you spare some food? Almost like begging. And some of them gave him good food. And they came back, he had a good day, he brought food. So one day, our train left, and he stayed behind. He couldn't run back to the train. So that's the word, you better go to Tashkent. So my sisters, where the next stop was, I don't know what town, went by, stopped the both of them, and we're going to get him back. We're going to find him, get him back. And they didn't show up. So my father went down, and he was waiting for them because trains go in different directions. And my mother and I came to Tashkent, and we were on the train station, outside, and we were waiting. And all of us came back together.
How long did you have to wait?
3 days. And all of us came back. My father came back with the whole family, and they found each other, and they brought them up back.
Just going back for one more question to the Langur camp, do you remember how did they keep religion, the holidays, your parents?
We didn't keep holidays. We didn't keep any kashrut anymore. I had a cousin there that came to Canada here after a woman from my father's brother's, it was my father's oldest brother's daughter, and she was living with a boy, and he didn't like it. He says, I'm going to give you a chuppah kiddushin. He's going to marry them. And he did it. He was a rabbi for half a day. made a l'chaim, whatever we had. I think, what is it called? Samagonka. That was liquor, vodka that's made or whatever. And at a l'chaim, and he married them. And they were both here. They were in Canada. As a matter of fact, when we came to Canada, we slept in their house for 6 weeks till our apartment was ready.
Illnesses. Were there any illnesses in your family when you were in Langor? And how did...
What's that?
If anybody got sick, you had diarrhea. Any other sicknesses when you were
My
in
brother
Langor?
got sick. My brother didn't get sick. After when the sun went down, he couldn't see. The sun was up, he was normal vision. So some people told him that he has a vitamin, it was called, in Poland, they're called a ślepa kura. It means the blind chicken disease. A chicken, after 5 or after it gets dark, you could go pick it up. Anyway, so they said that liver helps. And this, I remember a horse broke a leg in Langul, and my uncle, who lived across the street, said he needs liver, and he was a religious man. He cut the horse was shot, and the horse was dead, but they cut out a piece of liver and gave it to my brother, and it became. And he doesn't remember that. I don't understand that. My brother doesn't remember that, but it was known in my family that that's what he had.
Did you ever go with your father when he went away to work? Did you ever accompany him?
The only time I went with my father is when we had to go to the bathroom, and it was outside, and at night I was afraid of all kinds of animals. So he used to go, and he was a very heavy smoker. And he always said that if you hear somebody walking behind you and you're scared and you want to turn around and look them straight in the face, don't go running away, because it could be a friend, it could be anybody. Don't be afraid of, look danger in your face all the time, and you'll be much better off. So, why am I telling you as a heavy smoker? I was a little kid, and you go to make outside, and it's snow, and you sit, and he used to walk down, and I saw that little piece of the smoke, that little fire and back, so I was happy. He told me, watch my cigarette, you'll see me, because it was dark.
Are there any other stories that stand out in your mind from your time in Langor?
What can I tell you? There wasn't much. There was nothing. There was no movies. There were no cinemas. There was nothing, really. You live in a bush. It's like today, there's programs on TV, survival, how you survive. That's all we had to survive.
And when you finally could leave in 1941, summer of 1941, do you know why your father decided to go to Uzbekistan or Tajikistan?
Because it was a warm place. It was warm, and he knew where it's warm, where it's snowy. Warm, you don't need much clothes. You spend your days outside, to live. So that's where we went. And there, he got a good job. He was a baker for the town. When we settled down finally, so he learned to be a baker, and he was supplying bread and stealing bread for his family.
Where did you settle in the end? Because you went first to Uzbekistan, then you went on to Tajikistan.
Tajikistan, we settled in this little town called Koktash. And this town was mainly Tajiki people, and some Bukhara Jews. And it was a little town, I remember it more or less. Was a river in the middle passing by, and the river, was summertime when came the water from the hills, because Tajikistan is just like Afghanistan. The people there, when you look at TV today, it hasn't changed, the same outfits. They wear the same things then and now. and the town was really a nice little town between the mountains. It's like in the valley. It was very nice, and he got his job, and he was the KGB was trying to get him in trouble if he talks against the government, and the people who came to my father to ask for advice many times, because he was in Russia before, and they thought that my father is against the government. So all kinds of spies, but the spies came and told him, be careful, telling him, be careful, don't say anything against the government. And he didn't. But I remember that discussions. We lived in a hut that had no floors. It was just earth. And my sisters were washing the floor, and I don't even want to mention that in Tajikistan you heat your house with dung from cows. And how to make the dung from cows, you can't buy it. Everybody has it for itself, so you have to go and collect the dung yourself. And so I was selected as the guy that's going to supply the heating materials. So I went when the cows were walking, and I went, picked up, and then I found out another way. I used to take the tail of the cow and put my bucket there and wait till it makes me right into the thing. Then I came home, and the natives showed me how to take the Tajiks told me, take straw and break it up in little pieces, and then you have to do with your legs to mix it, and then make like round things and slap it on the wall outside of your house, and it sticks to the wall, doesn't fall off. That's what I did, and then we had dung to heat our house with. So that I learned. Then we learned how to steal peaches. Peaches, there I had already friends. I remember that one guy was older than me. His name was Jangir. And the other guy older than me was Camille. They know I was Jewish. And they had a gang. And I was part of the gang already. I was, 7 years old? They were maybe 8, 9 years old. And they taught me how to steal things. So, stealing things. How do you steal things? You come to a market where the farmers bring their watermelons, and they build like a pyramid, the watermelons. So one watermelon, if you take away suddenly, the whole thing falls apart. Then they run from all sides and grab and run away. Okay? So the first thing they told me how to steal, I couldn't swim. There was a river, I couldn't swim. So we went to a high thing, and Zhed, the Russians say Yevrei, but Zhed, I don't know where they got the language. They pushed me into almost a small little, coming down from the mountain, so it was kind of rough. And I got out finally. And I learned how to swim a little bit, and then better and better. Then we went to steal fish. When I was already a good swimmer, we went to steal fish. So how do you steal fish? They had some traps put in the river. The fishermen or families, they made a trap, and a fish gets in, and we have to steal the fish. How do you steal it? You go, you find not the wire, the rope that holds that trap, and you go with the rope, and you take out the trap, you see it's a fish, pull it out, and take it home. So I learned how to be a thief too.
How do you steal, you said how you steal watermelons, you didn't say how you steal peaches.
Peaches? I almost got killed. You watch out where the farmer has, and then you see that the tree has peaches. One guy climbs up, and then there's other guys are waiting to catch them and put them in their, you know, you have this in your pants, you fill up your shirt. So you steal peaches.
How did you get almost killed?
Because a farmer almost caught me. If you caught me, they beat you to death. So listen, it's part of my life.
How did you meet these boys in the first place?
On the market, my mother became a speculant, a speculator, selling her own stuff, a sheet. Then to find out where they make fabric, and she would go and buy fabric and sell it on the market for rubles. Rubles were... So when she had a good day, I was wearing knickers, you know, like here it was, and here it was elastic. So I used to pass by, open up my elastic, and she used to throw the money into my pants. And there was a lot of Jewish people and a lot of Tajik people doing the same thing. And the farmers were the buyers. So when I was doing that, I always had bread because my father, so the kids were hungry, so they saw me eating bread. They came over, give me a piece too. Can I get a piece from you? I used to give them, then they became my friends. And so my father told me, they're going to kill you one day, be careful. We used to call us shpana. You know what shpana means? Shpana means hooligans. That's in Tajik or something. And but I had a way of playing with them and being with my mother, not my father, with my mother, so I could help her, because they were constantly on the market, stealing whatever they could steal. And that was they had to survive too. You have to understand, not everybody had food, even in Tajikistan.
In what language did you communicate with these boys?
Tajik.
You learned Tajik?
Yeah, a little bit, not much. I still remember a little, but not much. But Russian, they spoke a broken Russian, but they spoke Russian.
You mentioned that your father learned to be a baker and he worked in a bakery.
Yes.
And how did he get bread?
There was a nachalnik, and there was my father, and he was feeding the whole little town of Koktash. So there was a guard with a rifle outside, and they used to get the wheat, and or not so much the wheat, they used to get the flour to bake. And so you couldn't take out a bread that was round. They used to make it like a pizza pie and put it around him and put the clothes on. And so that the nachalnik, my father used to make for him a pizza pie. And the guy with a rifle used to have, everybody looked aside when my father walked out. And that was it. He brought the bread. It was enough for our family plus.
Every day he would bring a bread like that?
Every day, every day. Then he had to make, once a year, they had to make cookies that was called praniki. And I go out to the Russian store and I buy praniki. My kids laugh at me, but I remember the taste.
What are they? What kind of cookies?
They're praniki, they're cookies. Some of them have filled inside and some of them with jam and some of them are just plain. But they have a certain taste that I remember. And that's why I found them in Florida, now I'm finding them here. Now some of my kids like them.
What did your sisters do and your brother? Did they work? Did they go to school?
My brother was helping my mother. He was the guy that found where to buy the materials so she should sell. My mother was arrested. She was in jail for No, 7 days. My sister was a tax collector.
Which one? Which
the
sister?
older one. She was with the mayor of the town, and she became a nachalnik, like, so she knew the procureur, which is the I don't know how you call it. I know in English it's a there's a lawyer that defends you, and then
Yeah.
the other side, what do you call them?
I
That
know who
accuses you. Anyway,
Yeah, I know who you mean.
the prosecutor. So she had the prosecutor. She knew everybody in town because she was a big shot. She was a tax collector. So she was my older sister. My younger sister, she was a ball of fire. She worked, I don't know, in an office or something. But then at night, not at night, on the day off, she used to go and buy stuff for food for us from the farmers at special prices and so on. And that was it. And I was the youngest. My sister wanted, when they delivered to the bakery, we were living on a little creek. A little river was in the middle, a small river. And they delivered, when my father made the cookies, they delivered 3 or 4 barrels of jam. So she was going with a chinik to bring my father tea, and then fill up the chinik with jam and bring it home. You learn how to steal. So she says to him, that's a little bit too much. I have to walk there and walk back. I know how to swim. Put a whole bottle in the river and I'll push it up all the way to the house.
And she did that?
No. My father said, you want me to put me in jail? So
you mentioned that your mother was in jail for 7 days. What happened? What's that story?
They came in the middle of the night, the KGB, and knocking on the door in the middle of the night. We walk up, and they come in and they start reading something. I don't know what they were reading. That my mother and my brother are speculators, speculante, and my brother was not of age, so they left him home, but they arrested my mother and they put her in jail. And my father right away, what is he going to do? So we had a few Jewish people. One was living in the same area as us. He was a watchmaker. He had some watches. So my sister, one that was the tax collector, said, I know the prosecutor, so get me a good, nice watch. And my father should go to the prosecutor, ask him to release his wife if it's possible. So the first thing, put the watch on his hand and then say, does it fit you, or something like that. I don't know how he did it. And my mother, when my sisters went to visit her, she says, if you don't take me, they're beating me up. The prisoners, the female prisoners were beating her every day. She says, you better take me out of here because they're going to kill me because I'm Jewish. Židka or Yevreka. And the prosecutor let her out. Otherwise you die in those prisons.
Were there you mentioned the Bukharan Jews, were there other Jews from Poland in this little town?
Yes, the Gizras were there. Our Mr. Linder was there, and then the watchmaker was there, and there was here in there was a family. I don't remember their name, but he was an agronome. The husband was an agronome, but she used to call me Henush. She used to like me. She was like a very sophisticated lady, and they had here a business like raising plants and things like that. A big
Nursery
business.
school.
Pardon
Like
me?
a nursery.
A nursery, yes. They were here. We didn't know that. We found out that they were here, and I went to visit them, and she remembered me. Hanush. And they had a father there. One of their father was taking baths in the river every day, and he was going in naked, and I was very, very upset of that.
So having a few Jews from Poland, was there any community life?
No.
Or religious life?
No.
And your family did not? How about religion?
No, my father decided after the year we were freed totally to go home to Poland, my father decided to bake matzah for the Jewish community, whoever he knew, because nobody had it for years, and it was against the law, and he found himself a little shut-down bakery, and there was an oven, and in Stalinabad, we moved from Koktash to Stalinabad, which was about 25 kilometers, and we lived there for a while.
All of you?
All of us, yes. We moved out of Koktash to live in Stalinabad, and that's where my, today it's called Arshambe or something like that. Stalinabad, they changed because of Stalin's name, they took it off. So my father was baking matzah against the law. And if he would have been arrested, I was the guy that was doing the little holes, so we had like a little pizza knife, but it has needles in it, and you would just go like this, like this, like this, like this into the matzah. And when I got tired with my hand, I went outside to watch nobody watching us. And we made matzah, and just for everybody, and no, it wasn't a business, it was to give people to celebrate Pesach.
But that was just 1 year.
1 year.
In 45?
Yeah, the last year, yeah,
yes,
before we left back. And in Stalinabad, there was quite a few Jews. Bukharian Jews and other Jews that we didn't know from before, Polish Jews, so on.
But when you lived in Koktash, you did not observe anything?
No.
No, okay. And
Pesach we used to observe, but we used to eat bread. We couldn't.
But you wouldn't do a Shabbat dinner or candle lighting?
We didn't have the food. After a while, I remember one year, we bought chickens on the market, and my brother, who was older, and the chickens were put in a little hut, tied their legs. My brother had Rahmanut on them. He couldn't stand the chickens, so he untied them, they all run away. Yeah, that was fun.
You mentioned some illnesses that you and your mother had when you were living in Koktash.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yes. I don't know. I got sick. My mother was sick. And the real doctors came to visit. And they said to my parents that we're very ill. We might not survive. They gave us quinine. And it's bitter. I used to take it. I remember the taste of it. Didn't help. And I remember my mother getting up from bed, and my sisters were doing the bed for her. She couldn't stand. One had to hold her, and the other one made the bed, and they put her in bed, and same thing with me. I couldn't stand either. We were really almost finished. We were very, we couldn't move, we couldn't. Anyway, so one Bukharian Jew found out, it was a not far a neighbor, he came in and he says, I'll bring you a doctor that is, he's not a doctor, but he's going to give you something, it'll help you. And he came and he took a piece of root that he had he had like a pouch, took it out and took out the thing, and he made it into powder, and he gave us to drink, and he told us to take it for 3 times. And the next day we were fine. We were totally fine. We were back to normal. So call it a witch doctor or something like that, but he helped us.
Did you have any relationship with the Bukharan Jews other than this?
Sometimes they used to come and tell us how to live in this, how to survive. And they had ways. They were religious, the Bukharian Jews. They were wearing kippas and wearing white clothes, if I remember that, because they were dressed like the Tajiks, but in a different manner. Different. The Tajiks had a chalma on the head. They had a white little hat, and almost like a priest. The religious ones. The other ones were, but we didn't mix with them very much. Didn't mix with them, but.
Why was that? They were Jews, you were Jews?
I don't know. They were different. They were not like they pray differently. They pray like Arabs pray, They sit down and they keep on. If the Chazan reads, they repeat what the Chazan says. Just like Arabs, just like, it's a different way of praying, but they were good to us. They were very good to us.
You mentioned that they kind of taught you how to survive. Do you remember any of their lessons?
Whom?
The Bukharan Jews.
Well, how to survive there, that, how to behave, more or less, with the Tajiks. They didn't tell it to me. They told it to my parents. I don't know. If you needed something, if you needed help, to find a house, to things like that, they would help you.
How did your family find the hut that you
I don't remember.
And you lived in the same hut the whole time you were there?
Yes. I remember when we came there, we had to stand in line to get some food. And the food was not for money, it was given to us when we came. So we had to stay in line, and my brother was so quick that he got to the front of the line and he brought some food for us. And I still remember the taste of a piece of meat. I never remember the taste. I remember the taste now, even. I remember the taste of my grandmother's ice cream, because I had a business in Buckingham, here in Canada, and I stopped for an ice cream. And I asked the guy to give me an ice cream, an orange ice cream, and it was exactly the same taste as my grandmother's ice cream. I still remember it.
You mentioned that the hut, one thing you mentioned about the hut is that it had an earthen floor.
Yes.
How many rooms did you have?
One.
Like the kitchen and one room?
One room. I don't remember if we had a kitchen.
Oh, so where was the cooking done?
I don't know. Outside, I think, on a fireplace. Because it was warm and we were sleeping outside sometimes, so like grapes grow, the leaves of grapes grow on a thing, and in the yard when we got out from that, it was, like they put some pieces of wood that make like a little fence, and the grapes grew over. So when sometimes we had a chicken, so you used to put the chicken up after dark, and in the morning the chicken was down by itself. So we were sleeping there. We had cuts, I guess, and I remember, I think my father was working during the night and making bread, but we were sleeping. My mother and us were sleeping outside, and my sister. We used to fight with my brother all the time because you wash the floor with dung of a cow, and when it dries, it becomes like a cement. It stinks, but when it dries, you get used to the smell. And she used to wash the floor, and they used to come in and walk on it, so he made a few marks, and she used to hate that. They'd let it dry first, and he was he used to bug her a lot. And they used to fight all the time. Fun fighting, but not...
Who were your neighbors? Did you live in a Tajik neighborhood or in a Bukharan Jewish neighborhood?
We had a Tajik neighbor that invited my sister and my two sisters and my mother. And I was a little guy. I still have the picture someplace. I wasn't very big, I don't know. And we all got dressed in their type of clothes, and we went to see her, and she was a belly dancer, put out a show for my sisters. And she says, if my husband would find out that I did that and there's a man in here, he'd kill me. So make sure that my father doesn't come in and knock on the door or something. My father was at work. So they spoke Russian, and they got, my sisters got communicated with her. Was a very nice lady.
Did your parents make friends with anybody Tajik or Jewish, or was it just your family? And
I guess they had friends, but I don't know if they had friends that were really, that you hang out with them. They had friends, I'm sure. My father had in the bakery, he had Tajik people. They used to bring flour on donkeys. Donkeys, that's the way they used to bring the flour. So I guess he had Frank. His nachalnik, I'm sure, was friendly with my father because of what they were doing.
How about school for you? Anybody thought sending you
in
to school?
Stalinabad, I went for maybe 2 months to school.
That was just right before you moved?
In Kokhtash, I didn't go to school. But in Stalinabad, I went for 2 months to school, and they found out I'm Jewish. The kids found out I'm Jewish, and they were Yevrei, Zhid. When you get called Zhid, as a derogatory, it's not a good word.
Yeah, it's like derogatory. Yeah.
So. I stood up. My father told me that from young, stand up to people, and I told them I'm proud to be a Jew. Ya garzush to ya Yevrei. And the next thing, my father was called a couple of days later to the school, and he asked the principal, said, if your son is not careful, they're going to beat him up badly. So tell him not to stand up for himself. So my father says, my son didn't do anything wrong. So he says, I'm a Jew too, but shh. The principal was Jewish. He says, that was a Bukharian Jew. He says, let him not stand up. Let him take it like the way it is, and that's it. Don't make a big thing out of it. So that I remember. And my father he was very proud at what I said. I was a little kid. I wasn't afraid.
You said you went to school for 2 months. What grade did they put you in? Could you read and write, or that's the first time?
I learned a little bit of Russian writing. In reading, I was okay already because Russian letters are different than
Cyrillic. Yeah.
That you can't pronounce. My name was Grisha instead of Harry. It's Grisha because Hersh is, so it's different. But I forgot it. I still know the letters, but.
Who taught you to read?
The school that I went to.
Yeah, but you couldn't read until then. So that's where you learned to read and write.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But the main school that I really learned was when I came back and we were in Germany after we got through Poland. We're in Germany, and that's where I met Mr. Goldig, Philip Goldig. I think he still remembers me. I don't know. I remember him.
I will ask him. Now we come to the end of the war.
Yeah. And
you're allowed to leave. Did your parents have any news from what was going on?
No.
In Poland? No. So how did you know that the war ended?
Well, everybody knew the war ended because I guess there was a radio that would tell you the war ended and we were free to go, and Polish people were free to go back to Poland, so we went back to Poland.
How?
By cattle car again.
Do you remember the journey?
Yes, we were going back, and I remember a lot of things. I remember the Jewish people learned to go make a fire to put in the wheels of the trains to take out the oil. They didn't know that it could ruin the train. So they used to, when there was a stop, everybody used to cook. You got your kipitok, which is the hot water, and you had a little bit more food now, right? So you had a few groschen or groschen in your pocket. So you were able to survive, and we had fat from sheep that my mother made jars of, and so the journey was faster this time. I mean, I think we traveled for about 2 weeks, and we were in Stettin.
And no guards or anything during the travel?
Yes, guards. You could see the guards going back and forth on the outside. You shouldn't break anything. So the people who were taking the oil were not allowed, because it's the liquid, the oil, is essential to the wheels. So a lot of people had being beaten up and so on. And another story is my cousin went down, the cousin that passed away here. He was he was working in an iron shop, and he was hitting the metal with big hammers. He was a real strong guy. And a guy that was doing something on the outside the car there, the wagon that we were in, wasn't his relative, was just a Jewish man sitting. And one of the guards came over and pushed him over and gave him a shot with the end of the gun. My cousin doesn't think twice, wacko, and hit him on the chin and put him down. The guy was knocked out. So they didn't let the train go home. They had to find my cousin. So what happened? He came in back and is trying to hide inside the wagon. His mother, Crandall, what you gonna do? She was always wearing a sheitel. Put him on a sheitel, make him look like a girl. And they didn't find him. And came home. He was a tough guy, this cousin Leon. And we brought him home. It was a victory for us. He was dressed like a woman. A dress and things like that. No, past it.
When you got to the border between the Soviet Union and Poland, how did that go on the way back?
No problem. We went right to... the only border we crossed is when we went through Szczecin to Berlin. That's where we couldn't, because the Russians didn't let you out. But we made it.
So you're back in Szczecin. What's happening there? Why did you decide to go back to Szczecin?
My father heard on the radio or something that that's the town that Jewish people gather and look for the families. There's a Jewish, what do they call it? It's like a Jewish bureau that gives you information about all the people that came back, and he wanted to look for his brothers and for relatives, my grandparents, from my mother. And we went every day. We were in Stettin. We had a house, a broken house, but we had a house. And in Stettin, you have every morning, my sisters and my father picked themselves up and go to and my brother too, and I stayed with my mom. And they went to look for family, and they couldn't find anybody. And so my father says, let's get out of here. I don't want to be under the Russian supervision or whatever. And my sister met my brother-in-law saw my sister. He loved her. She was a beautiful woman. And he, like they say, he just followed her everywhere. And he had a big mouth, you know. He's doing this, he has money. My father says, I don't like him. It looks to me like he's a businessman with how should I call it? He's looking for, don't know how to say it, human trafficking, you know what I mean? He must be in that business. He looks at a beautiful woman, so he's after her. Anyway, he worked so much that he invited himself to our house. And I didn't like him because he talked too much. So he invited my parents to go to meet his parents. And my father liked his parents. And my sister, to be honest, he was a good-looking man. She liked him and they got married. Within the month they were married. So that's when these two families, all together, we crossed, with plus another few Jewish families in one truck. We crossed. My father organized that, and my brother-in-law, helped him organize, and we got together a few people who got through the border.
How? Tell me about that journey.
On a truck with a cover up. We were about 30 people or something. We were stopped. They checked us. They took us out. They searched us and they let us through.
But they knew that you were, like, who?
Somebody smeared.
Okay.
There was in advance. The guards were being bribed. And we went through Berlin and we ended up in Schlachtensee, which was the American area. And we were there in a DP camp right away. And that was run by the American government.
Did your father want to go to Berlin? So he had these plans?
He wanted to be on the American side. And that's when we started to communicate. And from there, my father wanted to go to Israel. So we left our sisters in Berlin. My sister was married. The other sister stayed to help her because she became pregnant, you know, family. And she met somebody, and then she married afterwards in Stuttgart. But we went to Pocking because it was also run by it was a DP camp there, because the Beitar and the other, the Shomer HaTzair, were ready to transfer people to Israel. So my father applied to go to Israel.
But you're running ahead because you spent some time in Berlin,
yes,
in the DP camp. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
So tell me about your
life. Well, in Berlin,
there.
you know, the town was totally destroyed. It just looks like Gaza. It was totally destroyed. We were given good food in the camps. They had a school. I went to school there for a couple of months. I was there about 2 months again, no more.
Tell me about that school.
The Jewish school, they tried to teach us Hebrew and mathematics, and just like a normal school like here. Teachers were good, they were Jewish, they taught us everything. Even physics, because we were grown-up children. I was 10 years old. They start to teach you these things. Read and write Hebrew.
That's when you learn to read and write in non-Cyrillic, right?
Yeah. That's what, then after 6 weeks, I mean, the school ended. I think they ended, or I left in the middle, I don't know. We were there about 6 weeks, that's all.
What months are we talking about, or what season, do you know?
It was summer, there was no snow, it must have been April, May, June, I don't know.
46, 1946.
Yes. And then the Beitar, or the Shomer HaTzair, they were in charge of taking us to Pocking, where I met all these Gilding, what's his name?
Golding.
Yeah, Golding. He remembers me a little bit, but I was younger than him anyway. But we were in the same class. So from there, we were going to school. Now the school principal was one of my father's friends. He was a very educated person, and he was running the school. And I was going to school. I learned a lot of things. I was going at the same time to the Lubavitch for learning Torah. There was another school, but there I learned the Torah. I learned how to daven. Not much of it, but because I didn't like it, but I learned how to daven. And that was it. We were there for, I think, a year and a half.
How did you, I mean, you really started school at the age of 10 back in Berlin.
Yeah.
How did you manage? Because you're not used to being in school.
My father taught me a lot of things. He taught me how to read a little bit in Russian. My mother too. My mother was, I didn't know how to write yet. I learned how to write in Germany, but I did not. School came easy to me. I don't know. I just got into it and just like that.
And the discipline of it, because in the way you described when you lived in Tajikistan, you were quite free.
I didn't go to school there.
Yeah, but you were free. And
Yes.
suddenly you find yourself in a school system, you have to go, have to sit in class, there are
You
rules.
learn from that. You learn from the teacher. You learn the A, B, C, D, E, whatever. In those days, it was the Russian A, B, C, D, E, you know, and I didn't know much of school. I was very well aware of mathematics. This was my best subject. And I was very aware of reading things, but only in some languages. Maybe I read Jewish more than anything else because my father was writing in Jewish and letters came in Jewish and so on. So I learned Jewish. And then from Jewish to Hebrew, it's a different language, but it's the same. So it was easier, but I was in the sciences. I was ahead. I was well ahead of when they put me in Parking into a school. I knew already a lot of stuff.
When you were in Berlin, only 6 weeks, I know, what did your parents do? Did they work or what did they do?
Speculating. They were getting, you were getting American soldiers were there, a lot of them, and they were selling, some of them were no smokers. They used to get a carton of cigarettes and they were selling it, and so they could get into a bar and drink for it. So they were buying those cigarettes, and the German people, they were dying for cigarettes, so they were selling you something else for that. So it's like bartering, but it's actually black market stuff. So everybody made a little money. My father was not involved. My brother was involved. And my mother was involved a little bit. But in 6 weeks, you can't make much. But my sisters stayed behind, and their husbands made good money doing that. And they were already bringing in cigarettes from someplace else and not from the American army, and selling and so on. So quite a few Jewish families became very wealthy from that. My family became okay, wealthy but not wealthy enough. I mean, enough in those days. Today it doesn't sound like much, but in those days was wealthy. So we came to Israel with Frigidairs, and because we took their stuff to Israel because they were supposed to follow us, my sisters. And they were married and their husbands didn't want to come to Israel. My father said to them, don't come to Israel because it's not a free society for business.
In Berlin, what was the accommodation like in the DP camp? How did you live?
In barracks. There were barracks made. I think they built them up for us or something like that. A camp barracks.
And each family had their own room, or were there big rooms with many people in it?
No. Each family had their own room. So we also had it in Poking barracks, army barracks. We were in Poking in a army camp. So we had the barracks already ready from the German army before.
And the meals or the eating, was it together? Was there like a mensa kind of thing, or each family to it?
Kibbutzim were together. There were some groups, like if you belonged to a group like the Shomer HaTzair, the families were together. They went to the rest, they had like a little place where to eat together and so on. But if you were private, you had your own. You got food. They gave you rations of food. I don't know. I remember we had Spam, and I loved Spam. Really loved it. We had milk that was like honey, really like honey. I remember those things. They gave us chocolate. They gave us everything. I can't complain about the food. Even wasn't the best food, but it was food.
And the same thing in Poking?
Yeah.
How about religious life in the DP camps?
At Poking, yeah, there was religious life. There was the Hasidim had their synagogues. They made they made like a little shul. My father went to daven all the time. My uncle, the one that I tell you, Leon's father, he was very religious.
So there, your family picked back up religion?
Yes, my mother did. My father was religious, but modern, very modern. He used to shave, he never had payas, and he married into a family that was so religious, but he didn't change.
And observing religion within the family in the Poking camp?
Yes.
What did you do?
We came, whatever was kosher, my mother kept a kosher house. We tried to get kosher food. Whatever wasn't kosher, we sold it and get kosher food.
How about Friday night dinners and Shabbat?
We had another mother's sister that her husband was passed away. He died during the war, and her son was the manager of the Shomer HaTzair, which was against Beitar. It's two different, right and left. And when we had a dinner in their place, we had it like with a lot of people. So we had to sing Litei Avon before, and he made us do a lot of things which we didn't like. So it's different life. Everybody has his own politics.
How about your bar mitzvah? Where did you have your bar mitzvah?
I had my bar mitzvah, I think, a week before we left in 1948. I went to shul. I said they gave me to go up to and say my two brachot on the Torah, which my father made me do. He taught me. And l'chaim with a piece of herring, and that was it. I didn't get the l'chaim. They drank the l'chaim, and that's it. I didn't have much of a bar mitzvah. My mother baked a couple of cakes. That was my bar mitzvah. But I didn't learn about my parsha that I should have. I didn't have that.
Because you didn't want it, or?
Didn't have the possibilities, I guess.
What were the pastimes for young people like yourself in Poking, in the camp? What did you?
We were playing soccer. We were playing soccer. We went to boxing appearances. I had a very, very, very religious friend who his stepfather was beating him every day. His name was Mickey Fishbein, and he was Hungarian. and he was 12 years old at the time. I was 11 and I was 11, I think he was 12, but we were all in the same class. And between the DP camps, there were DP camps all over. So they had boxing matches. I used to love watching that. I went once to practice boxing. I got one shot in my jaw, and my brain went like that. I said, this is not for me. But Mickey Fishbein was an excellent boxer, excellent. So there was supposed to be a match between two 20-year-olds, but one 20-year-old got sick. Our 20-year-old got sick. This was between Poking and Bad Reichenhall. They brought in the groups was lightweight, middleweight, and till heavyweight. That was entertainment for the boxing, the camp, and they looked for a guy to go for the lightweight guy, that 20-year-old guy. It was a good boxer. They looked at another boxer, couldn't find it. My friend Mickey Fishbein said, I'm going to go. And he knocked him out. A 12-year-old knocking out a 20-year-old. Can you imagine? Knocked him out. And that's the picture I'm missing. I had a picture with him. And they told me that he became a rabbi in Israel. And I went all over. I couldn't find him.
In the DP camps, there were Jews that came from different countries originally. How was the relationship between Jews from different countries?
It's like any time. You have here different countries, one doesn't like the same thing. It was more togetherness, yes. But they had fights between those parties, the Shomer HaTzair and especially the left against the right. Jews fight a lot.
Fight meaning physical fight?
Yes. Some of them came in horses to fight. I don't remember exactly, but I remember sitting in a movie house. We had a movie theater, and the Beitar came in on horses to chase out the others from the movie theater. I don't know why. I don't remember why, but they didn't like one another. Even it's like Begin and Ben Gurion. Look, Begin went ahead. They brought in the Altalena to Israel, and Ben Gurion, if you don't give us the weapons, we're going to drown you, and that's what they did. Yeah, I'm sure you'll read about it.
What other cultural pastimes did you have? You talked about boxing, which is sports. What kind of culture?
We played soccer a lot in the spare time.
No, but that's also sports. Culture. You mentioned the movie theater. What other cultural?
We used to see. Once in a while they made dancing. I liked the boogie woogie. I used to dance that. I used to dance with my sisters, but my sisters were married already, so you find a girlfriend that you dance. And then we danced horrors and things like that, like any other time. But there were times we didn't have much entertainment, but when it happened, and then they had weddings, people were getting married, so there were comedians, Jewish comedians. We used to like to hear them. So,
did you make a group of friends there in Poking?
Yes.
Who were they? Who were your
friends?
Well,
I tell you, Mickey Fishbein and this guy Rothstein, the one that didn't recognize me. And then there was a couple of Israelis that I don't remember. They're in Israel. Studler. I don't remember his first name. But we had all, it's very funny, but in my age, to remember names is just impossible. And
then I ask it differently. So Fishbein was Hungarian. What was your common language with all the others who were not Polish?
Yiddish. He spoke Yiddish. I spoke Yiddish. We all, and some of them spoke Polish, but you could say there were here in Montreal. There were 3 people that went with me in the same school. and two of them passed away here. What's the last name? Oh my God, just because I want to know. I know them very well. I knew them very well. Sonia?
We'll ask afterwards, okay?
Okay.
What was I gonna... Did you go out into town from the DP camp?
Yeah, we used to travel to Munich.
What did you do there?
Just to see the town.
With your parents or with your friends?
Sometimes with the school, not with my parents, and sometimes with the you were belonging to Shomer HaTzair, or I was belonging to Beitar, so Beitar used to take us.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, to see the town and so on.
And when you went out and met Germans, what was the relationship? How did you deal with Germans?
I used to hate them. I hated them. I didn't want to have anything to do with them. We had in Porking, we had a very good area that were there. We had hot water coming out from the earth, and a lot of people used to come there. There were two big, I think they were big pools made for people to. So when you got into the water, it was so hot, like boiling. But they made it cool off a little bit, and then we were allowed to swim. So we had things like that to do, and then we were looking for things what the Germans did, and when maybe they hid some stuff. So we were in a camp of airplanes that were there producing the what do you call the German airplane? I don't remember the name now. And we were playing soccer one day inside the big, where they keep, their big
hangars.
And we were playing soccer, a bunch of kids. We were about 20, 25 kids, two groups, and we were kicking the ball. And one ball hit a wall, and all of a sudden it turns around and opens up, and there's a lot of weapons in there. So we called the Beitar. Beitar, don't tell anybody. But there were Shomer HaTzair kids in the same, and they called the Shomer HaTzair, so there was a big fight. And Israel needed weapons. We discovered it was maybe, I don't know, rifles and things like that. And I think it was a lot, maybe not a lot, I don't know, but it was a big thing. They took it. They took it to Israel. There were people that were sent from Israel to prepare us to come to Israel. So it was illegal until the government, we were going on an illegal trip to Israel, but we became legal when we were in Italy and we took the boat. We came in already that the British soldiers, whatever, didn't stop us. We came into port, and we were on a ship that was a few times going back and forth, bringing in Jews from. So we were in Bari, Italy, and we boarded in Bari, out of Bari a few kilometers, and took us to Israel.
Well, you said that the Beitar prepared people to go to Israel. What kind of preparation did you get?
Not me, I was too young, but what they taught us that what Israel is, and it's a country that you have to fight for and things like that, and you have to be, it's our country and we have to liberate it. It wasn't liberated then, so you be prepared to put your full power, whatever guts you have, into Israel and make it into a Jewish country. So we will not have what we went through before.
When you were in the camp, you said that you hated the Germans. I mean, you had some experience of the Germans back from Ulanov, but yeah. What else did you hear in the camp about what they did?
Well, everybody, there were people from Auschwitz, there were people from all over the world. So you automatically, it's like Israel, the Arabs hate the Jews. I mean, because one doesn't get along with the other. They killed us. The Germans killed us. They killed my family. Why shouldn't I hate them?
But you knew, like, you heard about the concentration camps in
Sure.
Okay.
That was made. Listen, I hated some Jews that people accused of being capos in the things. You didn't like them either. I didn't hate them that I'm going to kill them. But you hear all kinds of things. It may, as a child, you absorb a lot, and you don't know how to deal with it. So, what do you do? I mean, I'm not going to go over and hug this person.
Why did your father decide to go to Israel as opposed to, say, Western
Because he
Europe?
was a Zionist.
Okay.
He wanted to be. That's what made us feel. When I come to Israel, I feel at home. When you land, before you land the plane, and they start playing Hevenu Shalom Aleichem or whatever in Israel, it's like a different life. A few years ago, I went to Israel. I want to move back. I wanted to go there and live there, but then I'm getting older, and how am I going to see my grandchildren?
So you mentioned that you got on a ship from.
Yes.
So how did you go? You left Poking. What was
the Israeli I don't know how they call it, agent or whatever. They came and they directed us what we have to do. So they told us we have to go to Bari. They arranged everything. We were in Bari, and then from Bari, I don't know where the port was. Out of Bari, I think we went by buses and we boarded the ship. And the ship's name was Atzmaut, which is freedom. And we were like on a cattle train. I mean, the beds were made out of wood. We put in a lot of people on a small ship. And they brought us in.
How long was that ship journey?
6 days, 4 days, I don't remember exactly.
And you started off on an illegal ship, as you say, and by the time you got there.
Yeah.
So where did you land?
We landed in Haifa. And we were put into we had a lot of stuff bringing with us. So they would put us into because it was our sister's furniture, the other sister's furniture. We had 4 or 5 Frigidaires. We had motorcycles, a few. We had bicycles. We had 3 pianos. We had a brand new machinery for a bakery to open up. Brand new machinery.
You brought all that on the ship?
I don't remember if it was on the ship or coming after with a transport. I don't remember. But it was all sent together because my sisters accumulated some wealth, and they were supposed to come to Israel because my brother-in-law's parents were already in Israel. They came, illegally. But when we came to Israel, they took us into a quarantine separate, and we waited, and a few days later, they brought our stuff, and they say, what is this, what is that, what? So they opened up our fridges, and they opened up the doors and looked inside. I mean, they unscrewed the inside and to see what's in between the doors, if we bringing in something illegally. That's what my father did not like at all. And because you're coming to a country where you hope to have freedom, and all of a sudden you're in a quarantined, I don't remember the little area what they took us. And then they put it all back together and they let us go.
And then where did you go?
We went to live with my Mechutunim, my brother-in-law's parents. We lived there for 2 weeks. and we bought a house from somebody that belonged to an Arab. We were in Yafo. No, I'm sorry. Sorry, I forgot. First, we were in Beit Lit for 6 months in tents.
Oh, tell me about that.
That's where I started school. I went to school in Netanya. And they put me into a very grade, I think grade 3 or 4, to learn Hebrew. And I used to communicate with the Netanya, where Beit Lit was near Tulkarem, which is now under the Arab, the West Bank. So I used to take my bicycle and travel. We had bicycles. We were already freed with our stuff, and we put it in storage. On my uncle had already moved. He was before us, and he moved to Yazur, a little town. So we put it there. We covered it with tarpaulins, and we lived in Beit Lit, which was intense for about 6 months. I went to school, to Netanya, till school finished. And then my parents bought a restaurant. We put everything away, and we brought some money with us, and we bought a restaurant.
Where?
In Yafo. Yeah. Because my brother-in-law's parents had a restaurant. My father couldn't get a permission to build a bakery unless he went to apply for it. So they wanted to give us a town like Yazur for us alone, open a bakery, and we will have 49%. We have to build the bakery and do everything, and we will have 49%. We have 7 partners at 51%, which were war veterans that had injuries. And nobody else is allowed to open a bakery in Yazur because we had everything in Yazur. So my father didn't like it, and he said, so we bought a restaurant. We lost all our money in the restaurant.
How come? Because
my mother has a good heart. If you had something and you're still hungry, more, So, and a lot of people ate on the cuff. You know what that means? On credit.
Uh-huh.
On credit. And some of them didn't have money to pay back. Okay, forget about it.
You ran very much ahead. I would like to hear a little bit more about these 6 months in the tents, what it was like.
I learned a lot. I learned that at night we used to go to steal oranges. I learned in Tajikistan. So that's what we did, and it was Arabs, and you could get them killed. And one day I went and I saw watermelons, big, huge, this long watermelons. And I had a carrier on the bicycle in the back. I take a huge one and I put it on and I tie it up. And I come back and there was 4 families in one tent, it's a huge tent for 4 families each. And I brought this watermelon for everybody because we became friendly. And I learned a watermelon you have to squeeze. If it's cracks inside, it means it's very ripe. That watermelon was cracking like hell. And we open it up, and it's bitter like hell. It's red like fire, bitter like hell. I didn't know it was for donkeys. Donkeys eat these kind of, it's a different type of watermelon. So you learn.
You said that the tents were big for 4 families.
Yes.
Like, how was the separation?
All of us has cuts, little cuts to sleep. So they're very small. It's for one person, you lie down. So in one corner, you have 6 cots. The other corner has 5 or 4, whoever wants. So 4 families in one tent, but the tent was big.
But no separation?
No separation, no. Then there were public toilets in another put up that's where all the immigrants lived, in tents.
How was the cooking facilities inside the tent, or?
I don't remember really. Don't remember.
And you just had cots? Did you have tables to sit down to eat? Or?
It was arranged, but you know, when you don't pay any attention to it, I didn't pay any attention. I was, you know, I like to go outside. And so, but when in Israel, it doesn't rain. It just was all for the sun. Wintertime, it rains. In January, February, it rains, but we weren't there in January.
In fact, what month did you arrive in Israel?
I think in the...
What season?
I don't remember, but I think in September or October. September, maybe. No, but school was open, so how can it be September? Yeah. Maybe August. I don't know. I don't.
So you did do a winter season in the tent?
No. Maybe we did have a winter season, but it was because we moved out to my Machatunim, and we were there for 6 or 8 weeks. So we moved out from the tent after. Now, we didn't stay for 6 months, but we were supposed to be for 6 months. We were in line to receive a house, not a house, a tzri for something, accommodations they called it. So when we went with him, with Al Machatunim, when we bought the restaurant, we found an apartment above the restaurant. So we stayed there, apartment, 1 room.
And once the restaurant went bankrupt, what happened?
We didn't go bankrupt. We sold it for, look, when we came to Israel, $1 US dollar was £1, you had to pay $3. So it was $3 for £1. When we got out, it was £3 for $1. So it cost us $18,000. It cost us 6,000 pounds. At the time, we had to spend $18,000. When we sold our restaurant, we got maybe 3,000 shekels, which was pounds. So, in other words, we lost it in the exchange was because the value of the money became the opposite. Yeah. So it's like 6 to 8 times lower than what. So from 18,000 US dollars, we maybe got $2,000, which we spent for getting on tickets, airline tickets, and things like that to get out of there.
How long did you have the restaurant the whole time you were there?
Yes, yeah,
3 years.
4 years.
4 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 4 years. 3.5 years actually.
And what did you do? Because you weren't.
I was in school. I was going to Tel Aviv to school. I was in a special school for I guess children that. I remember going on exams, and out of 2,000 kids, there were 4 kids allowed in it, and I was one of the 4.
It was high school?
High school.
So how many years of high school did you do?
4.
4?
3. I started in the middle. They put me in a higher grade. But the only thing that I was doing is, it was very, very tough school. It was school and also learn how to be an officer in the army, and Gadna, which is the junior army. So they gave you all, they taught you everything to become a leader. You know, in Israel, you don't say forward, you say after me. So your officer goes first. So if you're looking for officers, that's why you see so many officers killed. Because they're first into battle and the soldiers come after them. That's the way in those days it was.
What did you think back of those 3-4 years in Israel? What was difficult for you, or what was the most difficult for you, most challenging in life there?
I didn't want to leave it. My parents were going, I didn't want to leave Israel.
And why did your parents want to leave?
Because my father, we couldn't go to the United States. There was a quota. And my father says Canada has a dry border with the United States. So we'll be able to go by train to see each other. He says, I lived through with my family a war like this. I don't want to be without my family. He wanted to see his grandchildren, his children.
But wait.
My sisters were in the United States.
So they moved from Germany to the United
Yes,
States.
he told them not to come to Israel. He was very, 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 very influential for that, not to come to Israel, and they listened.
But after your father was a Zionist, you went to Israel, and then he wanted to leave.
Yeah, because he didn't like the way there was no freedom in those days. For the government controlled you all the way, and he wanted, like, for example, you can't open a bakery unless you have 7 partners, and they have the control of you. They have 51%, you have 49%. You have to build everything. He was a businessman. He didn't like that. But he loved Israel otherwise. He would give his life for Israel. But
where did your sisters move to in the States?
Where
did your sisters move to in the States?
One moved to New Jersey and one stayed in New York. And
how did they manage to get in? Because there were quotas.
They applied in Germany after the war, and they came to the United States in 1950. They applied in 1947 or something like that. I don't know. My mother had a brother, and she could have gotten a request to come, but my father didn't want.
So he decided on Canada.
Yeah.
And when did you arrive here?
In 1952.
1952.
Then January 1st, 1952. Yeah.
Did you have any acquaintances, anybody here to help you?
Cousin. We didn't know we have a cousin, but we found out we have a cousin.
So you just came to a totally unknown country, totally unknown.
Country,
and
yeah.
Why Montreal?
I don't know, because we didn't have somebody to request our coming. We paid money to find, and you know who brought us up? A Steiner family. Umfriede von Steiner, a Steiner family which I never met. And they got $1,000 for that, us to come to Canada.
When you got here, did you get any help? Did you go to the Jewish community to make contact or get help?
I went to the Jewish, I had a scholarship to go for architecture, but I told you that before, that I went to McGill, and they said, we'll accept a scholarship, but you're too early. You missed a semester, so why don't you come back in September, learn a little bit of English, and you'll come back, and we'll accept you. But my scholarship had a thing that if I become an architect, I have to come back to Israel and teach architecture. I don't know if I could be a teacher, but that was the. Anyway, the principal came to my father in Israel, and he came in to see my father, and he told my father, we need people like him. Why do you taking him out? He's ripe for us. He's going to help to build the country. So leave him here. We'll take care of you. My father said no. He says, I don't want, I'm going to be close to my other children. I can't leave. So I was almost in the age of army. And I'm lucky that they did not stop me for that. And he says, okay, if he goes, I give you here. I give him a scholarship. Let him think of that. And if he decides to come back, let him do his studies and come back. And I accepted the scholarship, and that's where I went to McGill. They told me not that I should come in the next semester. In the meantime, I went to the Jewish, there's a Jewish, what do you call it?
You said Jewish Vocational Services.
Vocational, that's what the words I was looking for. Jewish Vocational Service, they gave me 2 little, papers. One is for one company, the other is for another company for a job. I went to one company, and they told me that my salary could be $45 a week, and you will be, what work do I have to do? I have to be a shipper and pack glassware. Just simple to do. $45 was a decent wage. And the other one was in a store, a wholesale, to work as a salesman or something like that, but you start in the bottom, and to be work in the wholesale. And I came home and it's $25 a week. It's a big difference. I wanted the $45 a week. No, I couldn't get it because my father was against it. He says, here you're going to learn things, you speak to people, and there you're going to stand there and talk to boxes. So so I took the $25 a week, and I became a very successful guy I worked 7 days a week if I had to. I did everything 100%, and my boss was very happy. And I was manager after a year and a half. But I was too young. I was only 18 and a half. As a matter of fact, there's one person who lives in this building who worked with me. He's a year younger than me. And he says, you were the strongest man I could ever. I was very, very strong. He says, you were the starker in Yiddish. And I told him how to work and go ask the boss for a raise. He says, I wanted to ask for quoting him, I wanted to ask for a $5 raise, and you told me to ask for $10. He got $10 raise.
What kind of business was this?
Wholesale dry goods. I converted his whole look of the store and everything. And we became very, very successful even more. So my boss was good to me. He paid me very well, very, very well.
How long did you stay there?
For 2 years.
And after that?
I had the sister, and I told you my father, before I said my father was wearing heavy glasses. Here's the picture of him in the back. He was wearing heavy, heavy glasses. And when we came to England on the way to Canada, they said that he has to have somebody to sign for him in case he cannot work or he's not allowed to work. So, when we came to Canada, what was I going to say?
No, you're talking about how you changed your job after 2 years.
So we were working. I was working. I was making good wages. My brother was working in Northern Electric. He learned in the Oort in Europe, and he became a guy that knows how to set up machinery. So he was a setup man. And he was making like $65, $66, $70 a week, I don't know. And we used to bring our checks and give it to my father. My father didn't like that. He felt like he hasn't got anything, and he didn't have any more pride in himself. He wanted to work and earn his. I don't know how to explain that, but that's the kind of man he was. So we told him, you gave us, you brought us up, you gave us everything for so many years. Aren't we allowed to give you a little bit back to support you? No. So they put him, he found a job. He was 57 years old. He found a job as packing tomatoes in a little box with 4 tomatoes in a box, and seal it, and 4 tomatoes in a box. And he came home, when we saw his legs, they became this thick. Because he had to stand the whole day. So his legs were swollen, and we said, no, you're not working anymore. And they wouldn't stop. He went to work.
So we were talking about how you went out to do business by yourself, that you didn't want your father to go work.
We didn't want to work, so my sister came. We didn't have any money, and she notices that my father is really, down and out, and she was afraid that he might become, going into here's a single word.
Depression?
Depression. So she says, how can we wait? Are you good enough to go for yourself? I was only 19 years old. And are you good enough to go for yourself? So I said, well, I could. I could make money. So she says, if I give you money, how much money do you need? So I said, I will need a certain amount, but I'm not going to take it for free. You're my sister, and it's fine. If I'm successful, I'll give it back to you. If I'm not successful, I will work my rest of my life to give it back to you. And she said, don't worry about that. You just worry to keep our father, and he should be a partner to you. So I said, fine. So what can you do? I said, I could only go to the people and sell them. I was a wholesaler, not a retailer. So I spoke to my boss. I said, I'm quitting. I'm going for myself. And I will be in the same business as you were. And if you decide to let me go, and I would like to buy stuff from you, because I know how much you will charge me. We used to charge some customers 10% profit, some customer 8%, I would like a 5% profit to pay you, but I will buy from you. He says, no. But then he says, okay, he says, if you go for yourself, good luck to you. But if you go to my customers, I'll make you, and if you go against me, I'll make your reputation equal to mud. You'll be a thief, you'll be anything. But if you go for yourself, you want to make a living, good luck to you. You could come here, I'll charge you 5% profit, and you make the rest. If you sell 10%, fine. So he was a nice man, so I said fine, and I went out. My sister gave me $15,000. It was an awful lot of money in those days. I bought a car, a brand new car, for $1,800, brand new Pontiac. And I took out the back seats, filled it up with merchandise. Yeah, he also warned me, don't go to my customers. So I said, I promise you, there's not going to be one customer that if I go to, I knew the addresses and everything. But if they ask me to sell them, I told them, I will sell it, and I'm not going to charge you. You will going to get the profits. In other words, I'll sell the merchandise, and you go, if it's your merchandise in my car, because he sold me some, and I'll give you the profits. It's fine. So we agreed on that, and I went for myself, and I was doing very well. I sold a lot of stuff to totally different people that I knew. I spoke a little French. I went to Rimouski, Matane, Rivière-du-Loup, all the way up north in Quebec. I didn't go to Ontario. And I was doing very well. We went for a few days, and my father was my co-driver. He couldn't know how to drive, but he was when I was sleepy, he used to sing "Wake Up Little Susie" to me. So we were there we're like this for about 3-4 months. And I used to weigh 175, 178 pounds. And I went down to 140 pounds because I worked hard. I forget eating, even though I was always in a rush and so on. And also worries make you. So my father saw that I'm getting thinner. And he says, you're going to get, in Polish, they used to say sochota. There was a disease like what is it? It's a very contagious disease. Anyway, you're going to get sick. Not diabetes.
Chickenpox?
No. Sochota is...
I'm just trying to think of...
Anyway, so you're going to get very sick. In other words, you're not going to go anymore on the road. We're not going on the road. And he was my partner because That's the way. We didn't make any papers, but he was supposed to be my partner. And he was good. He knew how much this is, how much that is. He was watching me drive. And anyway, one day he says, you do only work in Montreal. And I started working in Montreal. And I was selling, going to stores and selling wholesalers. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. And one time I come in, I was doing well. I was making a living, just about the wages were about the same as I used to get at work, and sometimes a little better. And then, because I didn't give credit, if I would give credit, I would be even more successful. I didn't give credit. It was all, pay me now. So the thing was, one day I go by myself, and I said, Dad, you stay home? And I go into a store, and I come in, and one guy sitting there, and I said, he says, what do you want? I said, I want to sell you some stuff. I have a very good price on men's socks. He gives me hell, starts, get out of here. I didn't even break the ice. I didn't make a sale yet. It's 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. He says, I didn't make it. You want to sell me stuff? Buy my store, he says. I said, okay, how much do you want for it? He says, how much do you offer? So this, I make a story very short. How much do you offer? I was talking to him. I said, I'll give you whatever. I'm not going to count the boxes, nothing. I'm not going to open the boxes, what you have inside, because everything in those days was in boxes. Shirts was in boxes, socks was in boxes, underwear was in boxes, except a few things like sweaters were hanging outside. So I said, I'll give you $3,500 for it. He says, hey, you're crazy, get out of here. I said, goodbye, don't get mad. I made you an offer. And as soon as I take the door, wait a minute, give me $4,000. I said, no. Get $3,500, that's all I could give. So he said, okay. Took the keys. He says, these 2 sets of keys I have. Here's 1 set for you, 1 set for me. We lock the door, we go to a lawyer, and we do the contract right away. I was a little taken aback because I figured maybe I'm getting into something that I'm not supposed to. But I was a little bit of a gambler. I have gambling blood. And I worked in this thing, and I saw what that box carries, and if it's empty or is 1 shirt, more or less, my mind in those days worked much better than now. And I went to the lawyer, and I called my father, bring me the money. He brought me the money, and the lawyer made the deal. And yeah, I asked him first, how much rent do you pay? He told me $125 a month. So I was happy with that. I only have 1 year lease. I was happy with that too. So, because in my mind was to sell out and get out of there. And I got the store. I closed it. It was 4906 Verdun Avenue. I closed the store, and I was a little bit, I know how to paint, so I made some beautiful signs and blocked all the windows. Bailey's men's and boys wear going out after. I asked the guy how much. He says he's 20 years in business. I marked 25 years in business, closing, going out of business. And opening will be Monday. And that was about 10 days. I fixed everything up. I brought all the merchandise. I saw I have a lot of merchandise. Then I got happier, put it all on tables, and the rest hung up. And I figured it's a small store, it's a closed store. Maybe there are going to be a few people coming in. I didn't expect a lineup around the block. It was a lineup like I never in my life. So I didn't open it. I called my father. I went to a phone booth. I called my father. I said, get out of here quickly. I can't come to pick you up. Let Nathan pick you up. He says, no, I have no way of coming. So I let people wait. It was supposed to be open at 10 o'clock. I was there at 9:30 or 9 o'clock. I don't remember. I drove back, picked up my father, and I told my father to call my brother at Northern Electric to quit not to quit his job, to get up for a couple of days. And he says, I'll lose my job. So my father said to him, you don't have guts. Come on, get out of there and come help us. And we opened up the store, and we sold like you can't imagine. And then the first day I made back all my money, and I had a full store still with goods. And I don't know how much. We stood a year. My father had all kinds of different sales, and we made money. And from then on, he became my partner, and he became more, not my partner, family. He became a father again that told us things, what to do, what not to do in business. He was a good businessman, and he had a lot of guts.
So the three of you stayed in business, Nathan,
Yes.
your father, and you.
Yes, and then I paid my sister back, and I had a big robbery that I didn't have insurance, and they robbed me for at least $200,000 in those days. I didn't have insurance on that, but I had a good reputation. People trusted me, and my business was a good business until I had already 32 stores, and not in Montreal. We closed all our stores in Montreal because I had 6. And when the PQ came into power, my father says, let's get out of here. And we sold everything. We got out, and we bought businesses in Ontario and Nova Scotia, and in Northern Ontario, Nova Scotia, and Fredericton is
New Brunswick.
New Brunswick. Yeah.
All clothing stores.
All high-end, better clothing, you know.
This first boss of yours, was he Jewish? Was he
Yes.
Jewish? Yeah.
Gershon Kaplan, Kaplan's wholesale dry goods.
Now, to go back a little bit to when you arrived, what were your, if you remember, what were your first impressions of Canada and Montreal?
Snow, which I don't know. I remembered Siberia, and I was called. We bought an apartment. No, we didn't buy an apartment. We rented an apartment. We had to pay money for getting out of this apartment. You have to key money, they called it. So we lived on the 3rd floor. We had a ice frigidaire with ice, not with, and we lived on Clark and Bernard. And the fashion then was dark ceilings, and the floor was a wood floor, but it wasn't really sanded. So I decided to sand the floor, and I decided to paint the ceilings. I painted navy blue ceiling for my mother. She says, "You made me clouds, dark clouds above me. I don't like it." So anyway, we lived there for a few months. Then I bought another store on Jean Talon, and we moved to Park Extension.
But that was after a few years, no?
After a few years.
So you stayed in the same apartment on Bernard for a few years?
We stayed on Bernard for maybe 2 to 3 years.
All 4 of you, Nathan, you and your parents?
Nathan got married in 1958. So
yeah, but you came in 52. So
I came in 52, and Nathan got married in 58. So it was 6 years. We lived there for about 4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years.
And you stayed with your parents until your marriage, your own marriage?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I
was a bachelor. I was an old man when I got married. I was 26 years old when I got married. They considered all my friends got married at 21, 22.
At the time. I asked you, and then we just cut off on another topic when you came. Did you have any contact with the Jewish community when you first came?
No, except with shul to go to synagogue. We moved to Chamonix where we got married. We moved to Chamonix, and I was a member of the Young Israel, and we made a lot of friends in Chamonix, especially my wife. And I was always busy driving from store to store, store to store. I opened up quite a few stores, and I was always out of town.
But that was the first synagogue you belonged to in Chamonix? Before that you didn't belong to a synagogue?
No. There was a synagogue we used to go for the holidays, was Clark and Jean Talon. It was a synagogue. It's closed now. They built another building there. So we used to go there for the holidays. My father went there to synagogue, yes.
How did you meet your wife, Sonia?
How do I meet? She's going to tell you a different story.
It's okay, that's good. I'll have two stories then. Tell me your story.
My story was, I had a store in Jean Talon, and I had a man working for me who was a Jewish man. I had a few, but he was one of the, almost like a manager, a Jewish guy. He was from Edmonton, and I took him in, and he worked for us. And he got married, so he asked me to be an usher on his wedding. So, listen, I couldn't refuse. I mean, so I was an usher on his wedding, and her mother and her father were invited to that wedding. And I guess they spoke to him because they knew his wife's parents. They were friends. Who is this guy? And they said, he is the boss of my whatever. And the parents, the mother decided she liked me or something, and she wanted me to meet her daughter. She was a very popular girl. She had lots of boyfriends, anyway. So one day, he was living on near Côte des Neiges, near Jean Talon, something like that, an apartment building on Goyer Street, I think. Mm-hmm. So he invites me. He says, "Can you give me a lift home?" I said, "Yeah, if you want." I was going the same way. I had a car. You lift home. I said, "Okay, I'll take you home." So when I park, I let him out, and I said, "Okay." No, he says, "Park, I want to show you what I built in my apartment, my furniture." Okay, I'll go up. He begs me so much, and she was there. And somehow I had a good look at her, and she was pretty, and she was what I asked her to go out. And yes, okay. So I went for a drive, and I bought a brand new car that time, very new. It's not the car that I used to own. It was a Pontiac, a beautiful car, sporty looking and so on. I take her for a drive, and I drive around. It's snow, it's winter. I drive around. I drive into Caughnawaga. So I drive around, and all of a sudden my car conks out. Doesn't work, and we're in nowhere. We have nothing but snow in the road, and I'm not much of a mechanic. Maybe I know a little bit. I opened the hood. It's a brand new car. How can it stolen me? I opened the hood. I look. I don't understand. So I see there was one little, not a box, looks like a cylinder, and a crack in it. I take some grease. I figured maybe if I put in grease in the crack, it's going to close if anything. Sure enough, I go in, the car starts. It was the alternator, cracked. Starts. So I was afraid that she's going to get scared, and maybe I'm the kind of a guy that acting up on that. Anyway, we got home and asked her out for a date. And she was going out with a friend of mine who was older than me. But she continued going. She said, okay. And her friends were against her. You're throwing away the other guy that you were going out. I was lucky I got married.
When did you get married? What
When?
year?
1961.
61.
We received from the government a special date with, after 60 years, they send you a certificate. Nothing, they don't give you anything, but just a certificate that they recognize you're 60 years married. That's it. That's why. Oh, I'm sorry.
And once you got married, you moved to Chamonix. Who became your friends? Who were your circle of friends? Where did these people come from?
My circle of friends were mainly business people in the business. Her circle of friends was Baron Bing, all the, which now they're still friends. My business people, some of them are gone. Some of them went bankrupt. So all the Schmatte business, the Schmatte business is the clothing business. So a lot of them, I had very good friends there. And with my friends, I had to wear a suit and tie and things like that. With her friends, I had to wear jeans. I took her once to Mauritius, and I knew I have some friends there. And she came, I told her, we're going out, we're going to Mauritius. She put on jeans. In those days, to wear jeans was like, and I said, are you kidding me? We're going to Mauritius. I had suit and tie. Anyway, we went to Mauritius. Hi, Harry. Hi, Harry. A lot of people in this business, Friday night, they went to relax a little bit. So, to tell you honestly, until I had my heart attack and I had my bypass, I was not having any fun. Everything was business, business, business. After that, when I had my bypass and I started playing golf, I found a new world.
How old were you then?
63. My kids brought me a bag with clubs, and Dad, you're not working anymore.
And these business associates, were they also Jewish or French Canadians?
Well, I had a big staff of people, between 300 to 500 people sometimes. 400 people were my actual staff, and part-timers in this. And I spoke French with my staff, mainly French, and we were very close. We were very, very close as friends. I was a very friendly boss, and I never was a dictator type of boss where a lot of people are. My people were very good to me. I was very good to them. As a matter of fact, some of them still are in touch. That was it.
Did you have any... Was it important for you to make friends with other immigrant Jews or survivors? Or
Sure, it's important. Sure, it's important. That to me makes no difference, survivors or anybody else, except for one person who, when I was living in the first apartment of Bernard and Clark, the three families were all Jewish. The bottom place was a notary, a Jewish notary. The middle place, I didn't know the lady. The stairs are outside, and I was shoveling the snow, and I shoveled just where from our door down, and not her balcony. So she called me, Hitler should have killed you too. So you have Jewish people like that too. And if you got on the phone, there was party lines, and they were talking and talking, and you wait. Listen, I got a call. Go to hell, they used to tell you. So I took Jewish people. How can they say Hitler should have killed you too? Why? I have to clean your snow from your... If she would ask me, maybe I would. But I cleaned the bottom stairs where she was going down too. But I didn't clean her, I didn't shovel her snow from her side of the balcony. So you have all different kind of people. You have good people. I had a good bunch of friends. She had thousands of friends. So we in between us, we had a good relationship with people.
Was the war something like a topic of conversation
Never,
between you and your
never.
friends?
And I didn't discuss it even with my kids. I just told my kids that times are war times. I told them I lived through the war, and I told them war is not a thing to be easy-minded about it. I said, God forbid, I told you before, we had ours that we went to Russia. We had a much better chance to live than my family that was killed. So I don't consider myself that I lived through a lot. I don't deserve this interview too. I'm telling you right now.
You do deserve this interview because you also lived through things.
No, I mean, as a child, you don't live through like my parents lived through. Maybe my parents would talk differently. But I don't, I mean, people who lived through the kinds of lives that they had to live through. I had a neighbor that told me he lived in a bunker in a forest for years, 3 or 4 years. That's Maxwell Smart, you know?
Yeah, we interviewed him.
Yeah. So he had a different type of life as I did. I wasn't afraid that I'm going to be shot the next hour or something like that.
And your children, they didn't want to know more, or you shut it down if they asked you questions? Because you said you didn't really talk much about it with them.
Well, it didn't come to the way of telling them that I lived through a lot. Why should I make them, having pity? Like I had a friend who passed away. He was single. He lived single. He had a business. He was a taxi driver. He didn't say anything about the war until he fell sick. He started telling me he lived through Auschwitz. He lived through a few concentration camps. So it's a different. People don't talk about it. Eugene Edelstein, an ophthalmologist. Now it's Chaim Edelstein, who is his son. We're very close because it's like family. He was my mechutin. He was my son's father-in-law. He never talked about it until he was on his deathbed. He started talking to his kids because you don't want to talk about these things. You want the world to be nice and beautiful for them.
Did you talk with Sonia about it?
She knows some things, but her father lived through the same thing I lived through. She was born in Siberia, but she didn't know anything because she was a baby. But I didn't live through what my father and mother lived through. I mean, I can't compare that. They were hungry. I was eating because they gave me their portions. Yeah. So you can't be like I saw in Germany, in Berlin, a big fight came out between Jews. They found one couple that killed his own father. And they were beating him. They're beating him like hell. And we were run out of school to see him. And they were yelling, he killed his own father. He put a board on his neck and choked him to death for a piece of bread. That's so why it's an unpleasant thing to talk about, really.
Talking about your children, how many children do you have?
4.
And what are their names?
Aaron, Michael, Glenn, and Sherry.
And when they were younger, what kind of Jewish life did you have
They
with them?
They went to Jewish school. They went to Herzliya High School, and one of them went to McGill, and he became a lawyer, and he got his law degree in Toronto. He went to Toronto, forget the university especially for lawyers. Then he fell in love with an American girl, so he passed the New York bar within 2 weeks because he decided to become a lawyer there too. I sent him to be a corporate lawyer, so I had a family that had his own law, not law firm, but a public company that sells all kinds of investments, investment agency. So he's my niece's husband, so he took him in, and he lived with my niece, and he met an American girl, fell in love, got married, then divorced after 4 children, and that's it.
And did they have their bar mitzvah?
My children?
Yeah.
Yes, all of them. I have a granddaughter from the same husband, the same son, that remarried, and he remarried a non-Jewish woman who was wonderful, a wonderful person. And they had a daughter who is now 17, who's an outstanding young lady. And I sent her on the march, and not me, my son sent her on the March of the Living just last year. And she brought me back all the names, and they asked her if she wants to have a bat mitzvah. They asked her if she had a bat mitzvah. They asked her, who didn't have a bat mitzvah? And she says, I didn't. And she's not religious, Jewish or Christian, it doesn't matter. But she wanted to have a bat mitzvah, so I'm proud of her. But we're not forcing her any. There's no religion in their family to fight about. They live their life without religion. That's fair. I was invited to a Christmas party. They were invited to a Hanukkah party. Her mother, who's 95, and she wanted to be a Hanukkah party. They made the Christmas party together with the Hanukkah party.
So I have just one last question. You say you didn't want to talk about this, you didn't really share it with friends and family. Why did you decide to share it with me now?
I'll tell you, it became a thing that I'm afraid that people are going to forget about it. They already denied it in a long time. They keep denying that Holocaust ever happened, or concentration camps, or Russian killing of people and Jews and so on. So if people read about it or hear about it, and there's more about it being displayed or in the world, maybe the young people who are growing up, my great-grandchildren, my grandchildren, are going to know about it. And they're not going to be deniers like they denied the Holocaust. That's why I'm opening my mouth to do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't do it. You know, there's a lot of people asking me to come to meetings. We're going to discuss things, but they don't do anything. All they do is collect money. But what's happening? It's not the collection of money. It's the person that is reliable enough to take his word what happened, and you believe it. You believe in it. I want my granddaughter, who just went for that. When she came home, I took her and I showed her pictures of my grandparents and my father and so she should be able to identify what happened. That the picture, he was killed in his own little town. They shot him dead. I wanted, because she read about it there, that my grandfather's name was, oh my God. Oh my God, Jesus, I can't believe that I don't have memory anymore. Raphael Graf. Raphael Graf was killed by the Germans, shot dead. I want her to identify this with his picture, so she should know. But otherwise, it's just a name. Oh, Raphael Graf was shot dead. If you see the picture and you see it, it puts into your memory, oh, this man was killed. That's why I talk about it. Otherwise, what for?
Is there anything else, Harry, you would like to add? Something I didn't ask?
No, I tell you didn't ask. I didn't expect to be 3 or 4 hours on.
I did tell you, though, last time. Thank you very much.
I didn't expect that.
Though.
And I think I talked too much.
No, I really appreciated it, and thank you so much.
You're welcome.